Chapter 430. Master Yao Fei Ku. Godan and Duanmu Lu were both stunned. They had actually heard of this name before. Huh! Nie Tian was stunned and asked, "You know this person?" Yao Fei Ku. Nie Tian had only just learned of this name from Murong Xing. Yao Fei Ku was Murong Xing's teacher. Looking at Godan and Duanmu Lu's reactions, this Yao Fei seemed to be a very famous person. Teacher, Grandmaster Yao Feik is the Vice President of the Spirit Array Master Association. He is ranked 3rd on the Spirit Array Master ranking. Duanmu Lu calmed down and explained. Spirit Array Masters also had their own guild, the Spirit Array Masters Guild. But because the number of Spirit Array Masters was far fewer than alchemists, the power of the Spirit Array Master Guild was not as strong as the Alchemist Guild. Moreover, the Tao of Spirit Arrays was much more difficult than the Tao of Alchemy. In his previous life, when Nie Tian was in the Heaven Realm's God domain, his Alchemy Tao had already reached level 9, but his Spiritual Array Tao was only level 7. Furthermore, in the entire Heaven Realm's God domain, the strongest Spirit Array Master was only at the 8th rank. There had never been a 9th rank Spirit Array Master. The Tao of Spirit Arrays involved too many things, such as all kinds of spiritual materials, the power of heaven and earth, the laws of heaven and earth, and so on. With the lifespan of a human being at most 1,000 years, wanting to reach the level of a Tier 9 Spirit Array Master was practically impossible. The 3rd Spirit Formation Grandmaster. What a character! Nie Tian smiled and couldn't help but nod. Boss Nie Tian, how do you know that the person His Highness Xian King is waiting for is Master Yao Feik? Godan continued asking. Nie Tian smiled faintly and confidently explained, the reason why the Xian King doesn't dare to enter the palace immediately is because he's afraid that someone will harm him. To specifically wait for a person, of course, he must be waiting for an important person. At the very least, he must be someone who can contend with the imperial preceptor behind the crown prince. There shouldn't be anyone in the Great Chu Empire who can contend against the state preceptor. Otherwise, Wang Haoshuan would have been recruited long ago. Therefore, he can only invite this big shot from the outside. Miss Murong mentioned before that her teacher, Yao Fei, and King Xian's mother are martial siblings. With this relationship, it shouldn't be difficult for the Xian King to invite Master Yao Feik over. That makes sense. Godan and Duanmu Lu nodded deeply. They really admired Nie Tian's analytical ability. Just by listening to Murong Xing's nonsensical words, he was able to guess that the person Wang Haoshuan was waiting for was Yao Fei. Nie Tian's thoughts were truly terrifying. Nie Tian had already determined that the person Wang Haoshuan was waiting for was Murong Xing's teacher, Yao Feik. The time-space teleportation scroll in Murong Xing's hands must have been refined by Yao Feik. The person who could refine the spacetime teleportation scroll must be a rare spacetime Spirit Array Master. Only such a person would be able to contend against the Imperial Tutor. Nie Tian's lips curled up as he murmured to himself, a spacetime Spirit Array Master. I'm really looking forward to it. There was a hint of excitement on his face. The spacetime attribute was the 10th attribute in addition to the metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, lightning, light, and dark attribute. It was not a variant of the 9 elemental attributes, but an independent attribute. Spirit Array Masters were already 1 in a million, and spacetime Spirit Array Masters were 1 in a trillion. The number of spacetime Spirit Array Masters that Nie Tian had encountered in his previous life plus his current life could not be counted on one hand. To be able to meet a spacetime Spirit Array Master in the 3,000 small worlds, Nie Tian was naturally excited. The next morning, Nie Tian had just walked out of the room when the Xian King Manor's servant came to invite him, saying that the Xian King was waiting for him in the meeting hall. After a while, Nie Tian brought Godan and Duanmu Lu to the meeting hall. In the hall, Wang Haoshuan sat on the main seat. On his lower left was a tall man in white. The man had a long beard that reached his chest, but his face was rosy and glossy, like a young man in his early 20s, making people unable to tell his age. This person had a faint smile on his face, and the aura around his body was very restrained, giving people a very low-key feeling. However, Nye Tian was able to clearly see that on the surface of the man's body, there was a faint power of formation runes circulating. Moreover, the power of the formation was extremely strong. It was actually a rank 5 spirit formation. A rank 5 spiritual array could only be broken by a spirit wheel realm warrior. This person actually carried a rank 5 spiritual array with him to protect himself. His attainments in the path of spiritual array were really amazing. Nye Tian probed with his divine sense, wanting to test the strength of this person, but he felt that it was as vast as the ocean, deep and unfathomable. The feeling that the person in front of him gave Nye Tian could only be described with one word: unfathomable. His mental strength was definitely above Gu Yi's, and his strength was at least true essence level 9, or even a spirit wheel realm warrior. Spirit wheel realm, this strength was definitely the strength of a peak expert in a first-rate empire. Not only was his attainments in the path of spiritual array extraordinary, his strength was also quite amazing. The person in front of him was indeed a character. Without a doubt, this person was Murong Ziying's teacher, the big shot that Wang Haoshuan specially invited, the third spiritual array master on the spiritual array master chart, Yao Fei. However, Nye Tian didn't think so. He speculated that Yao Fei's age was around 70 to 80 years old. At this age, his attainments in the path of spiritual array were so deep, and he was also an unusually rare spacetime spiritual array master. He should definitely be the number 1 spiritual array master. If this spiritual array master chart was made by Nye Tian, even if Yao Fei was only at the level of a rank 1 spiritual array master, his spacetime attribute alone was enough to be on the chart. Nye Tian walked over quickly and looked at Yao Fei without revealing any trace. He didn't take the initiative to speak, but waited for Wang Haoshuan to speak. When Wang Haoshuan saw that Nye Tian had already arrived, he laughed heartily and said, "Martial uncle, this is the famous Tian Luo City Lord, Nye Tian City Lord." Yao Fei smiled kindly at Nye Tian and didn't have much of a reaction. He only treated the latter as an ordinary person. "Greetings, Master Yao." Nye Tian nodded with a smile as a response. Yao Fei didn't show his emotions, and he was obviously a shrewd old fox. Nye Tian secretly became more cautious. And Wang Haoshuan didn't expect that Nye Tian already knew of Yao Fei's identity, which made him slightly embarrassed. Originally, he wanted to use Yao Fei's identity to suppress Nye Tian, but he didn't expect the latter to already know everything. However, Wang Haoshuan didn't tell anyone about the matter of inviting Yao Fei. Moreover, the former had just arrived at the Xian King residence, and even Murong Ziying didn't know about it. How did Nye Tian know? Could it be that this fellow was a legendary prophet? Thinking up to this point, Wang Haoshuan looked at Nye Tian with a complicated expression, and there was even more fear. "Haoshuan, you didn't specially invite me over just to let me meet the Nye Tian City Lord, right?" Yao Fei took a sip of tea. This was the first time he spoke, and he actually said something half-joking. "Of course not." In front of Yao Fei, Wang Haoshuan was full of reverence, and he didn't have his bad habit of not allowing others to see his face anymore. He said respectfully, "Little Xian invited Martial Uncle here because I want Martial Uncle to accompany Little Xian to the Imperial Palace." Wang Haoshuan didn't pretend and directly stated his request. Chapter 431. Nye Tian caught the strangeness in Yao Fei's eyes and couldn't help but frown. The shimmy that Yao Fei was talking about, of course, was Wang Haoshuan's mother. Nye Tian was very smart. From Yao Fei's eyes, he could see with a glance that there was definitely a story between the latter and Wang Haoshuan's mother. Yao Fei looked calm and careful without a trace, but this kind of person was more emotional. If Sherbo wants, Xian heir can accompany Sherbua to visit mother. Wang Haoshuan clearly guessed what Yao Fei Ku was thinking and said with a smile. Maybe other people didn't know, but Wang Haoshuan was very clear. When Yao Fei Ku was young, he had a relationship with his mother, Jing Fei. Later, they were separated by the great Chu emperor. But Yao Fei Ku was a very emotional person. Even though Jing Fei had become the imperial consort of the great Chu emperor, he still did not forget. Even now, there was still a trace of fantasy in his heart. Wang Haoshuan entering the palace this time, of course, wasn't to see his mother. But if it could make Yao Fei Ku happy, there was no harm in going. He could also show his filial piety. Why not? It was a pity that Yao Fei Ku was not willing to be involved in the whirlpool of worldly power. Otherwise, with him here, Wang Haoshuan wouldn't have to be afraid of the imperial tutor behind the crown prince. Now, he could only occasionally invite Yao Fei Ku. The latter was only willing to come because of Jing Fei. Wang Haoshuan always wanted to become Yao Fei Ku's disciple, but the latter did not agree. In reality, this was Yao Fei Ku's rejection of worldly power. Yao Fei Ku of course understood that if he really became Wang Haoshuan's teacher, then he had no choice but to participate in the fight for the great Chu throne. Yao Fei Ku nodded. At this time, Murong Ziying and Yao Er appeared. They were clearly invited by Wang Haoshuan. Teacher. Master. The two walked in front of Yao Fei Ku with their heads down, their voices as small as mosquitoes. These two ran out on their own. Of course, they had a guilty conscience. Yao Fei Ku did not blame them. He nodded slightly and said, "It's good that you are fine." Yao Fei's light words didn't have any extra reaction, but it revealed the love he had for his disciple. "Thank you, teacher." Murong Ziying finally raised her head and smiled. When Wang Haoshuan saw this scene, the way he looked at Murong Ziying changed. It was like a wolf seeing a little sheep. Although it was only for a moment, Nie Tian caught it perfectly. Nie Tian didn't say anything, nor did he show it. He just sat quietly, sipping the tea in his hand. "Martial uncle, let's head to the imperial palace." Wang Haoshuan stood up as he spoke. He also wanted to know why Nie Tian insisted on seeing the emperor. "All right." Yao Fei stood. Thinking about Jing Fei in the palace, a light flashed through his eyes. Nie Tian also stood up and prepared to leave. Actually, Nie Tian's desire to see the emperor was not as strong now. Compared to the emperor, he wanted to see the legendary and mysterious imperial tutor more. After a while, a carriage drove out of the Xian king's mansion and headed toward the imperial palace. There were only 3 people in the carriage: Wang Haoshuan, Yao Fei Ku, and Nie Tian. The current great Chu emperor lived deep in the imperial harem and rarely saw outsiders. Bringing Yao Fei and Nie Tian along was already his limit. Nie Tian let Guden and Duanmu Lu wait at the king's mansion. Just as the carriage drove out of the Xian king's mansion, a figure hiding near the king's mansion appeared and revealed a delicate and beautiful face. This face was none other than Zhou Yuyao, who welcomed Wang Haorui at the imperial tutor's mansion. She was ordered by her master, Tawny, to bring Nie Tian back to the imperial tutor's mansion. Unfortunately, Nie Tian entered the Xian king's mansion. No matter how arrogant she was, she didn't dare to barge into the Xian king's mansion. Thus, she hid nearby. The carriage is heading toward the imperial palace. Could it be that Xian king wants to see the emperor? Let's go back and report to teacher. Zhou Yuyao frowned slightly and disappeared in a flash. Soon, the carriage arrived outside the imperial palace. Nie Tian and the other 2 got off the carriage and walked into the imperial palace. The palace gate is as deep as the sea. Nie Tian looked at the majestic palace gate in front of him and couldn't help but sigh softly. The imperial palace's main hall looked magnificent on the outside. Who knew how much dirty secrets were hidden inside? With Wang Haoshuan leading the way, the 3 of them had a smooth journey and soon arrived at the main hall of the imperial palace. However, it wasn't the emperor who was waiting for them in the main hall. It was the crown prince, Wang Haorui, and the imperial tutor, Tawny. Knowing that Nye Tian and Xian King were going to enter the imperial palace, Tawny was one step ahead of them and was already waiting in the main hall. Wang Haoshuan greets my brother. After walking into the main hall, Wang Haoshuan didn't give a formal greeting. He only bowed slightly to Wang Haorui, who was beside the throne. The emperor retired to the harem, and the crown prince supervised the country. Unfortunately, he wasn't the emperor after all. Thus, he could only get another chair and place it beside the throne. Wang Haoshuan looked at Wang Haorui, who was only one step away from the throne. His gaze was extremely complicated. In his eyes, that throne should belong to him, and it could only belong to him. However, the person closest to the throne was Wang Haorui. Xian King, why did you come to the imperial palace when you weren't summoned by father? Wang Haorui sat beside the throne. Although he was talking to Wang Haoshuan, his gaze was fixed on Nye Tian, who was beside the latter. He didn't expect that Nye Tian would still dare to appear in the imperial palace openly after killing Lu Zhenyuan, breaking into the heavenly prison, and wreaking havoc in the Wanchun courtyard. If it wasn't for Tawny urging him to endure, Wang Haorui would have ordered the secret guards of the imperial palace to chop Nye Tian into minced meat. Nye Tian didn't care about Wang Haorui at all. His gaze was fixed on the imperial tutor, Tawny, who was standing beside the latter. At this moment, Tawny was wearing a long black robe and a black veil mask. There was a faint red halo circulating around her body. That halo seemed to have a very strange power. Even Nye Tian couldn't see her face clearly. Looks like you're the legendary mysterious imperial tutor. Nye Tian was slightly surprised. He didn't expect the legendary mysterious imperial tutor to be a woman. What surprised Nye Tian even more was that Tawny seemed to have the aura of the Scar of the Sunset Eye. The Scar of the Sunset Eye was ranked 9th among the 10 great innate eyes. It was ranked behind Rui Qianyu's 9-colored eye, but ranked ahead of the Purple Demon Eye, which was ranked 10th among the 9 emperors of the Heaven Realm. Nye Tian didn't know the true function of the Scar of the Sunset Eye, but he had seen someone with the Scar of the Sunset Eye. The person's aura was exactly the same as Tawny's. At this moment, Tawny was also observing Nye Tian. Her pair of foxy eyes seemed to be able to see through everything. However, she couldn't see through Nye Tian. She could only faintly feel that there was a very frightening power hidden in Nye Tian's body. This power made her Scar of the Sunset Eye inexplicably excited. Tian Luo City Lord Nye Tian, the person chosen by the Grim Reaper, can actually live until now. There is indeed the power to activate the Scar of the Sunset Eye in your body. Tawny was unusually excited. Even her body was trembling slightly. Chapter 432. This was the first time Nye Tian and Tawny had met. Although they hadn't spoken yet, they were both wary of each other. Nye Tian was wary of Tawny's Scar of the Dusk, but Tawny was wary of the power of the stars in his body. At this moment, Wang Haorui and Wang Haoshuan had completely become side characters. Even Yao Fik, the spirit formation master, had been ignored. Did Imperial Brother forget? Wang Haoshuan smiled faintly. With Yao Fik by his side, he didn't panic and said, I have the golden dragon token that Imperial Father gave me. I can enter the palace at any time. As he spoke, he took out a golden dragon token and waved it in front of Wang Haorui, full of provocation. Wang Haorui's expression immediately became gloomy. He pointed at Yao Fik and Nye Tian and said, Even if you can see His Majesty, what about these two? Do you know who Nye Tian behind you is? Wang Haoshuan didn't give way and said, I believe Imperial Brother knows better than me what kind of person the Nye Tian City Lord is. Wang Haoshuan, what do you mean by that? Wang Haorui couldn't sit still anymore and jumped up. Nothing, Wang Haoshuan replied faintly. Your Highness, your face recovered so quickly. It can't be a fake face, right? At this moment, before Wang Haorui could speak again, Nie Tian stood up and stared at him with a strange light in his eyes. Wang Haorui's face had been shaved off by Nie Tian 2 days ago, but he could recover in just 2 days. Even a 6th-grade spirit pill might not be able to do this. At the same time, Nie Tian had suspicions about Wang Haorui's identity. He said that Wang Haorui's face was fake, but it was actually a test. At this moment, Nie Tian had a bold guess in his heart. Perhaps the Wang Haorui in front of him was fake. Previously, Gu Wuyo had said that although Wang Haorui's martial talent was mediocre, he was extremely resourceful and won the support of everyone. Even if Wang Haorui became the crown prince and became arrogant, he would not become so stupid. Since Wang Haorui's face was restored to its original state in 2 days, why couldn't his face be fake? Thinking of this, Nie Tian felt that it was possible. Nie Tian, you. Wang Haorui's eyes became fierce. When he was about to lose his temper, Tawny waved her hand to stop him. Tawny motioned for Wang Haorui to stop talking. This guy was too stupid. If she allowed him to say a few more words to Nie Tian, he might really be exposed. But what she didn't know was that Nie Tian already had his suspicions. This time, Hu Shaoli didn't look at Nie Tian. Instead, she focused her gaze on Yao Fi. When she sensed the latter's strength, as well as the rank 5 protective spiritual array that he carried with him, she was slightly surprised. She already knew that Wang Haoshuan's mother had a senior brother who was a spiritual array master. Therefore, she had already guessed Yao Fi's identity. She smiled faintly and said, "You must be the 3rd spiritual array master on the spiritual array master list, Mr. Yao Fi, right?" Yao Fi's expression didn't change. He smiled faintly and said, "State Preceptor, you're exaggerating. I don't deserve it." Yao Fi's mental strength had reached an astonishing level 65. His strength was also at the 9th level of True Element. With a glance, he could tell that Tawny's strength was at the 9th level of True Element. Moreover, she had a faint tendency to break through to the spirit wheel stage. However, it seemed that she was being suppressed by some kind of power, preventing her from breaking through. Yao Fi could even sense that the power that was suppressing Tawny's breakthrough was concentrated between her eyebrows. It was an abnormally terrifying power, like a wild beast that was trapped in a cage. Once it rushed out of the cage, it would definitely have an earth-shattering power. However, Yao Fi still couldn't see that between Tawny's eyebrows was the legendary scar of the sunset eye. Tawny giggled. Her entire body emitted a demonic aura as she said, "Rumor has it that Master Yao Fi is indifferent to fame and wealth and hates worldly disputes. I didn't think that you would also come to this palace hall. How curious." Yao Fi's face was indifferent in the face of undisguised mockery. He said, "I was entrusted by someone to protect the safety of His Highness the Xian Prince." Entrusted by someone? Tawny smiled strangely and said, "Could it be that you were entrusted by Imperial concubine Jing?" Yao Fi didn't pretend and directly said, "Since State Preceptor already knows, why bother asking?" Tawny smiled again and said, "Could it be that Mr. Yao feels that His Highness the Xian Prince will encounter any danger in the palace?" Yao Fi responded, "It's always good to be cautious." Although the conversation between Tawny and Yao Fi looked calm, the latter's answers were watertight every time. From this, it could be seen that Yao Fi wasn't as simple as he appeared to be. He was definitely a very shrewd person. Tawny didn't bother with Yao Fi anymore. She didn't plan on killing Wang Haoshuan anyway. Nie Tian City Lord. Tawny looked at Nie Tian, but her tone was strangely calm as she said, "His Highness the Xian Prince wants to see His Majesty for no reason. He must have been entrusted by you." "That's right." Nie Tian smiled faintly and didn't deny it. "I wonder why Nie Tian City Lord wants to see His Majesty?" Tawny asked faintly. "To ask for forgiveness," Nie Tian answered. "Ask for forgiveness?" Tawny was stunned. Clearly, she was surprised by Nie Tian's answer. Nie Tian smiled and said, "I killed a person, broke into the Great Chu's prison, and caused havoc in His Highness the Crown Prince's 10,000 spring courtyard. Shouldn't I ask for forgiveness? Nye Tian, you shouldn't ask for forgiveness. You should ask for death. Wang Haorui heard Nye Tian say these things calmly. How was this a tone of asking for forgiveness? It was clearly provoking him. He stood up and roared angrily. Tawny turned around coldly and glared at Wang Haorui. The latter's expression turned cold, and he actually shivered. When Nye Tian saw this scene, he smiled faintly and said, "Looks like His Highness the Crown Prince is very afraid of Lord State Preceptor." In front of Tawny, Wang Haorui was completely an obedient little sheep. This made Nye Tian feel a little strange. Logically, the relationship between Wang Haorui and Tawny should be that of ruler and subject. But looking at the scene in front of him, the relationship between the two had been completely reversed. It was as if Tawny was the master, and Wang Haorui was her slave. Nye Tian City Lord, you must be joking. Tawny immediately realized something and smiled faintly. The Crown Prince is young and needs to be controlled. This State Preceptor is just doing his duty as a subject. Nye Tian nodded and smiled. He didn't say anything, but he was sure of the guess in his heart. Wang Haorui was very likely a fake Crown Prince. Wang Haorui's true identity might just be a pawn of Tawny. As for the real Wang Haorui, he was definitely dead. Changing one's appearance was rare, but it wasn't impossible. Wang Haorui's face was gone, and he would be able to recover within 2 days. Changing his appearance wasn't difficult for him. Nye Tian stared at Tawny and said in his heart, "Lord State Preceptor, it seems like you're planning a big conspiracy." At this moment, Tawny looked at Nye Tian and said indifferently, "Nye Tian City Lord, if you only want to see His Majesty to ask for forgiveness, then there's no need. This State Preceptor can pardon you on behalf of His Majesty." "Oh!" Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "You are only Great Chu State Preceptor. Do you have the power to pardon on behalf of His Majesty?" Chapter 433. Facing Nye Tian and Wang Haoshuan's questioning, Tawny's expression turned slightly ugly. Fortunately, her face was covered by a thin veil and others couldn't see it clearly. Otherwise, it would be really awkward. She was impatient and said the wrong thing. The main reason was that Wang Haorui was too stupid just now, which made Nye Tian suspicious, causing Tawny to make a fatal mistake. Pardon on behalf of the Emperor. Although it was just a few words, if one looked into it, it could be directly linked to treason. The biggest difference between an empire's power and an ordinary sect's power was the difference between monarch and subjects. A monarch was a monarch, subjects were subjects. Even if the emperor was weak, and the subjects were strong, the two's position must be master and servant. They absolutely couldn't cross the line. Once the line was crossed, there would be a price to pay in blood. Nye Tian understood the relationship between monarch and subjects better than anyone else. In his previous life, he was the #1 war god in the heaven realm. Even so, in front of Emperor Chenin, he still had to abide by his duty as a subject. But even so, Nye Tian, who didn't show any rebellious intent, was still schemed against by Emperor Chenin and his daughter. Monarchs had always been vicious and merciless. In the struggle for the throne, it was common for fathers and sons to kill each other. If a subject said something disrespectful, it would be considered rebellion. Tawny's words just now were undisguised words of rebellion. Even Wang Haorui, who was sitting next to the throne, didn't dare to say such words. "It's just a sentence, there's no need to make such a big deal out of it." Tawny immediately calmed down and said with a faint smile, "Moreover, there's no need for His Majesty to personally come out for such a small matter. His Highness the Crown Prince can pardon you." Wang Haoshuan still wanted to press on, but Nye Tian beat him to it. The latter said, "Imperial Preceptor, it seems like we won't be able to see Great Chu's Majesty today, right?" Tawny was the Imperial Preceptor, yet Wang Haorui didn't have the slightest reaction to her words. This was the strangest thing. Wang Haorui was the crown prince, which meant that he would be the next great Chu emperor. He should be the one who reacted the most to Tawny's words of rebellion. However, he did not react at all. There could only be one explanation for this, and that was that in Wang Haorui's heart, Tawny had already become the empress. Moreover, another piece of information revealed by this matter was that the emperor of the Darchu dynasty had already been controlled by someone. Nie Tian had heard from Gu Huio and Wang Haoshuan that it had been half a year since they last saw the emperor. In addition, the reason given by the great Chu emperor to retire to the harem was extremely laughable. Among the first-rate empires, those who were able to ascend to the throne all had their hands stained with blood. These people were all power-hungry. How could they give up the throne and retreat to the harem? This reason was almost absurd. Nie Tian guessed that perhaps the great Chu emperor had been controlled by someone 3 years ago, and it was uncertain if he was still alive now. His Majesty is currently in seclusion, Tawny said coldly, cutting off all hopes of seeing the emperor. Imperial father is in seclusion? Wang Haoshuan's face darkened and he said loudly, "Why don't I know?" Tawny did not speak this time, but Wang Haorui, who was beside her, spoke. Wang Haorui looked at Wang Haoshuan and smiled cold. With a face full of mockery, he said, "Xian King, aren't you being too nosy? Why should Imperial Father tell you that he is in seclusion? It's enough for me, the Regent Crown Prince, to know. As for you, you have no right to know." Wang Haoshuan's face darkened, and he suppressed all the anger in his body. He wanted to release it but did not dare to release it. The Crown Prince was right. The Emperor indeed did not need to tell him, a prince, that he was in seclusion. But Wang Haoshuan was not a fool. He could obviously sense the conspiracy in this. Nie Tian smiled faintly at this moment and said, "Since His Majesty is in seclusion, then we shall not disturb him. Your Highness, Xian King, let's take our leave." "You want to leave?" Wang Haorui saw that Nie Tian was about to leave and stood up. But in the next moment, Tawny glared at him fiercely. Wang Haorui was very close to her and felt her anger. He was so frightened that he quickly sat down. "Thank you, State Preceptor, for not looking into my mistake." Nie Tian smiled faintly and once again perfectly captured the small movements between the two of them. He did not say anything else and signaled for Wang Haoshuan to leave directly. "Nie Tian City Lord, this..." Wang Haoshuan obviously did not want to leave just like that and wanted to say something else. Nie Tian directly transmitted a voice to him and said, "Your Highness, Xian King, now is not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality with them. I think you can also see that something big has happened in the palace. Let's leave first. We can talk about other things when we return to the royal residence." At this moment, Yao Fei also nodded heavily at Wang Haoshuan. He was a smart person and could guess some things easily. Wang Haoshuan nodded hatefully, and the three of them immediately walked out of the main hall. "Teacher, why did you let them go? This is the palace. I can say that Xian King brought people to assassinate me. Just let the palace guards kill them directly. Moreover, as long as teacher makes a move, they will definitely die." Wang Haorui saw that the figures of Nie Tian and the others had already disappeared and immediately opened his mouth. But before he could finish speaking, what greeted him was a slap. Slap. Tawny's figure did not move, but the slap still landed loudly on Wang Haorui's face. 2 words were spat out cold: "Idiot." Tawny could already see that Nie Tian, Xian King, and the others were definitely suspicious. How could she not want to take this opportunity to take down Nie Tian? After all, Nie Tian had the power to help her open the Eye of the Scar of Dusk. However, the secret guards in the palace did not accept her orders. They only listened to the orders of the emperor. And now, the emperor was in deep sleep in his coffin. What made Tawny even more fearful was still Yao Fei Ku. Just the rank 5 spiritual formation outside of Yao Fei Ku's body was enough to ensure that Nie Tian and the others could leave the palace unscathed. If she made a move on Nie Tian and the others at this time, It was no different from directly revealing that the palace was already under her control. Now is not the time to shed all pretense of cordiality with Xian King. Be careful with what you say in the future. If you dare to speak carelessly again, be careful of your tongue. Tawny did not explain too much to Wang Haorui, this idiot, and only spoke cold. Yes. Wang Haorui subconsciously swallowed, and his face was dripping with cold sweat. His face that had just returned to normal was now swollen with several handprints. Tawny glanced at Wang Haorui and said in her heart, if it wasn't because your primordial spirit is a soul-devouring fungus that can devour the souls of others, this seat wouldn't have taken you in as a disciple. Soul-devouring fungus. So Wang Haorui's primordial spirit was a soul-devouring fungus. This was a very peculiar primordial spirit. It was an extremely small primordial spirit that basically had no combat power, but it could devour the souls of others and control or even replace them. How long will it take to completely control the Emperor? Tawny suddenly asked. Wang Haorui not only succeeded in replacing the Crown Prince, but the next task that Tawny gave him was to replace the Emperor. His Majesty's strength is at the 5th level of true elemental realm, much stronger than the Crown Prince. It will take at least half a year for the soul-devouring fungus to completely devour his soul. Wang Haorui covered his small face and said very aggrievedly. Tawny nodded slightly, and the corner of her mouth rose into a strange arc. She couldn't help but be somewhat excited in her heart. Half a year, after another half a year, I will be able to completely control the Great Shu Empire. Lord Pavilion Master, Shaoli will soon complete the task that you gave to her. I hope that you won't go back on your word. You must return that thing to her. Chapter 434. Wang Haorui noticed that Tawny seemed to be a little excited. There was an emotion that she didn't usually show. He wanted to ask but didn't dare. He felt uncomfortable holding it in. Wang Haorui, do what you need to do. You are not allowed to leave the palace during this time. Until you completely devour the Emperor's soul, Tawny said as she looked at Wang Haorui coldly. Yes. Even though Wang Haorui didn't want to, he didn't dare to go against Tawny's wishes. He could only nod with grievance. At the same time, outside the main hall, somewhere inside the palace, Martial Uncle, Nye Tian City Lord, something must have happened in the palace. Why do we have to leave? Wang Haoshuan saw that there was no one around and could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. He lowered his voice and almost roared. In order to not lose your life here. Nye Tian shook his head slightly, but his eyes were full of contempt. Gu Wuyo had said that Wang Haoshuan was very resourceful, but now it seemed that he was just a fool who was slightly better than Wang Haorui. Even if something really happened in the palace, what was the point of staying here? Were they going to fight to the death with the Imperial Preceptor? Once the palace guards sensed that something had happened, they would definitely stand on the side of the Imperial Preceptor and the Crown Prince. At that time, Nye Tian and the others would all die. Let's leave first. Yao Feiq sighed. His face was full of worry. Martial Uncle, aren't we going to see Mother? Wang Haoshuan was stunned and said, Doesn't Martial Uncle miss Mother? I can also ask her. She must know what happened in the palace. No. What Wang Haoshuan didn't expect was that Yao Feiq would reject him so coldly. Wang Haoshuan didn't understand and was confused. Yao Feiq had been very excited before. Why didn't he go all of a sudden and became so cold? Nye Tian looked at Yao Feiq and thought, this person is very smart. Nye Tian patted Wang Haoshuan's shoulder and said, Your Highness Xian King, if you don't want anything to happen to your mother, then don't go see her. Nye Tian City Lord, what do you mean by that? This prince doesn't understand. The confusion on Wang Haoshuan's face deepened. Nye Tian had no choice but to say, The Imperial Palace is now under the control of the Imperial Preceptor and the Crown Prince. If you go to find your Imperial Mother now, you will be pushing her into the Imperial Preceptor and the Crown Prince's line of sight. This is equivalent to exposing her to danger. If you really manage to get something out of your mother, then your mother will die the moment we leave. Well, Wang Haoshuan broke out in a cold sweat. He still couldn't believe it. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible. Yao Fei Ku finally opened his mouth and said, "That imperial preceptor is not simple. She has a hidden power that I am unable to see through. He even dared to control the emperor, so what if he touched a concubine? Right now, the best situation is to remain motionless. We'll talk about the rest after we return to the prince's mansion." "Martial uncle, you want to help me?" Wang Haoshuan heard another layer of meaning in Yao Fei Ku's words and became excited. There was no joy in Yao Fei's eyes, only a deep helplessness. He said, "I can't let junior sister be in danger. Moreover, I promised her that I would protect you." "Thank you, martial uncle." Wang Haoshuan almost jumped up in excitement and said, "As long as I sit on the throne, martial uncle will be the great Chu imperial preceptor." Nie Tian slightly curled his lips. Wang Haoshuan still didn't understand that Yao Fei Ku had no interest in worldly power. He was only interested in his junior sister. If it wasn't for his junior sister, a person like Yao Fei Ku would never participate in the whirlpool of worldly power. It could only be said that no matter how strong a person was, they couldn't escape the word love. Even someone as strong as Nie Tian in his previous life died in the hands of his true love. Was there a person with a heart as calm as water? Perhaps there was, but what was the difference between that kind of person being alive and dead? "Let's go." Yao Fei Ku obviously had no interest in whatever imperial preceptor. He laughed dryly and turned to leave. Just at this time, above the horizon, there was a sudden change. Boom! A huge ray of light like a white waterfall rushed into the sky. Nie Tian and the others all raised their heads and looked at the sky. The white ray was like a huge dragon, rushing into the sky and disappearing in the blink of an eye. At this moment, the entire Great Chu Empire, and even the entire North Sea region, all raised their heads and looked at the horizon with dazed expressions. They didn't know what was going on. "Uncle Master, that white ray just now." Wang Haoshuan couldn't help but be curious. He was just about to speak when he was interrupted by a loud sound. Boom! A loud sound reverberated throughout heaven and earth. It was as if something huge had broken out of the ground. Everyone could feel the ground under their feet shaking violently. Could it be that another ancient dragon soul has appeared? Nie Tian was shocked. Beneath his feet, the dust on the ground was shaken up, forming a cloud of sand and dust. However, he immediately rejected this guess. He could feel that the epicenter of the tremor was several hundred meters away from them. Moreover, the tremor was too great. If it was an ancient dragon soul, it was estimated to be at least tens of thousands of meters long. Something like that was simply a colossal creature. It was unimaginable. The king of the dragon race, the golden dragon, was only a few thousand meters long. It was impossible for a dragon soul to exist that was tens of thousands of meters long. If it wasn't a dragon soul, then what was it? At this time, Yao Fei's expression suddenly changed. His face, which was looking at the sky, froze for a moment. After a long while, Yao Fei slowly calmed down. He spat out 4 words: "Chaotic abyss." At the same time, Tawny also walked out of the main hall. She looked at the sky with a frightened expression. She couldn't help but murmur, "The chaotic abyss has opened." "Uncle Master, are you okay?" Wang Haoshuan couldn't help but ask when he saw Yao Fei's strange expression. Yao Fei didn't answer him. Instead, he said, "Let's go back to the king's mansion first." After saying that, Yao Fei hurriedly left. Wang Haoshuan and Nie Tian hurriedly followed. At the same time, in the core city of the 3,000 small worlds, Su Mi Ling City, figures soared into the sky and stood in midair, looking in the direction of the North Sea region. One figure stood proudly at the top of the clouds. His body was surrounded by strong winds, and his white clothes fluttered in the wind. He gave off a unique and arrogant feeling. This person looked to be in his 40s or 50s. His body didn't have the slightest fluctuation of origin power. However, a majestic aura automatically spread out. No one dared to get within a kilometer of him. However, next to him was a youth, and a very familiar face. Tang 13. Grandpa, what just happened? Tang 13 was also looking in the direction of the great Chu Empire of the North Sea region. The person next to him, whom he called Grandpa, was none other than the top figure of the 3,000 small worlds. He was the head of the Tang family, the head of the 4 aristocratic families, Tang Hao. Chapter 435. Tang Hao looked in the direction of the North Sea. His eyes changed strangely. 3 pale white ghost blades appeared in each of his pupils. 3 ghost blades was the sign of ghost eye being opened to the 3rd blade. Tang 13's double blade ghost eye allowed him to easily kill Tang Xiao, who was a whole realm higher than him. It was hard to imagine how terrifying Tang Hao would be after he opened his triple blade ghost eye. The ghost eye pierced through the sky and reached somewhere in the city of chaos. After a while, Tang Hao's eyes returned to normal. He reached out a palm. Threads of light gushed out of his palm and formed an image. Grandpa, this is... Tang 13 was stunned when she saw the image in Tang Hao's palm. What appeared in Tang Hao's palm was a bottomless abyss. It looked like a gigantic beast with its mouth wide open. Just looking at it would make people feel an irresistible urge, as though their souls were about to be sucked into it. This bottomless abyss was what Tang Hao saw with his ghost eye. 13. This is the chaotic abyss. Tang Hao withdrew his palm and let out a long sigh. An indescribable sorrow appeared on his face. The chaotic abyss. When Tang 13 heard this name, her expression changed. She immediately said, "Grandpa, I want to go." The chaotic abyss was a place that meant a lot to the Tang family, to Tang Hao, and to Tang 13. The last genius of the Tang family, Tang Duan, had been to the chaotic abyss. After he came back, he fell into a deep sleep and never woke up. Tang Duan was Tang Hao's most beloved son, and also Tang 13's father. What made Tang 13 even more concerned was that Tang Yuyu was brought out of the chaotic abyss by Tang Duan. This was a taboo in the Tang family, and no one was allowed to mention it. Tang Hao had only told Tang 13 about it. Even Tang Yuyu did not know about his background. Actually, even Tang Hao did not know who Tang Yuyu was. According to legend, the chaotic abyss was the ancient battlefield of the gods and demons. After the war, the chaotic abyss became a mysterious passage between the human world and the demon world. Tang Hao had a feeling that Tang Yuyu was not a human, but a demon. The chaotic abyss always appeared at irregular times. Sometimes it would open once every few hundred years, and sometimes it would open once every few years. The opening of the chaos abyss this time was only a dozen or so years after the last opening. Tang Hao looked at Tang 13 in front of him and suddenly thought of the latter's father. His eyes became misty. More than 10 years ago, Tang Duan had told him the same thing. That scene still made Tang Hao's heart ache. At this moment, this scene was so similar to the scene from back then. Tang 13's expression changed and her heart trembled. She didn't think that the man who stood at the top of the 3,000 little worlds would have such a sad moment. However, after some thought, Tang 13 said with determination, "Grandpa, I must go." Tang Hao collected his thoughts. It was as if he had suddenly aged several decades. His face had an unconcealable senility. He heaved a long sigh and said, 13, do you know? You really look like Luer. Very, very similar. They have the same face, the same eyes, and even their persistent personalities are so similar. Luer. Tang 13's father, Tang Duan, was ranked 6th, so Tang Hao called him Luer. In reality, Tang Hao knew that Tang 13 would go to the chaotic abyss one day. This was something that he couldn't stop. When he told Tang 13 about Tang Duan, he didn't think about stopping her. He just didn't think that day would come so soon. Tang 13's current strength was too weak. If she went to the chaotic abyss, there was an 80 to 90% chance that she wouldn't be able to come back. The chaotic abyss's reputation was similar to that of the ancient bloody tomb. The only difference was that one was in the southern mountain region and the other was in the northern sea region. Tang Hao looked at the persistent youth in front of him and finally exhaled deeply. He said, 13, you are a goshawk that soars in the 9 heavens. Even if I lock you in a cage, you can't be a sparrow in a cage. I can't stop you, and I won't stop you. Do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. Once upon a time, Tang Hao said the same thing to Tang 13's father. But no one knew that these words were actually said by Nie Tian to Tang Hao. Thank you, Grandpa. Tang 13 nodded heavily. Tang Hao's gaze swept across the surroundings and sighed. The opening of the chaotic abyss, I wonder what kind of storm it will bring. The chaotic abyss was the ancient battlefield of the ancient war between the gods and demons. It was the passage between the human and demon world. Nobody knew what was inside, but everyone wanted to know. Not only the Tang family, but the other major forces would also send people there. The chaotic abyss was bound to be a battle between tigers and dragons. Nie Tian, Yao Fik, and Wang Haoshuan left the palace and immediately returned to the Xian palace. Uncle, what happened just now? In the meeting hall of the palace, Wang Haoshuan asked impatiently. At this time, other people were also in the hall, and they all looked curious. Nie Tian heard Yao Fik mention a name, the chaotic abyss. He guessed that it might be an ancient ruin in the City of Chaos. Even though the City of Chaos was called a city, it was actually a region. It was said that the City of Chaos was even bigger than the Land of Bloody Massacre. It was not strange for an ancient ruin to appear there. The so-called ancient ruin actually referred to the war between the gods and demons in the ancient era, which resulted in the collapse of time and space. Many places became independent spacetime, drifting away from the current spacetime. Occasionally, there would be a connection with the current spacetime, which was the opening of the ruin. Seeing Yao Fik's panicked expression, Nie Tian guessed that the chaotic abyss should be a very famous ancient ruin. The chaotic abyss is opening. Yao Fik calmed down, and his tone became much gentler. The chaotic abyss should be an ancient ruin in the City of Chaos, right? Nie Tian asked tentatively. Yes. Yao Fik nodded. The chaotic abyss was originally a taboo, so it was not strange that many people did not know about it. Even Wang Haoshuan, the prince of the Chu dynasty who lived near the City of Chaos, heard of the chaotic abyss for the first time. Uncle, what kind of place is the chaotic abyss? Wang Haoshuan asked anxiously. Guden, Duanmulu, and the others were also interested. They all craned their necks, waiting for Yao Fik to explain. Yao Fik took a deep breath and said, The chaotic abyss is one of the 7 great forbidden areas of the 3,000 small worlds. It is an ancient ruin that opens irregularly. It is rumored that the chaotic abyss is the place where the gods and demons fought in the ancient era. There are countless ancient spirit weapons and ancient martial arts, as well as all kinds of killing formations and traps. Chapter 436. When everyone heard Yao Fik's description, their expressions changed. Every time an ancient ruin opened, the world inside would be different. This was indeed strange. However, it could also be explained. One possibility was that the chaotic abyss was the same as the bloody slaughter ancient tomb, an illusion. Then, every time one entered, the illusion would change, and the scene inside would change. Another possibility was that the chaotic abyss was too big. Every time it opened, one would enter from a different entrance. Naturally, the scene would be different. Nie Tian leaned towards the second explanation. After all, the bloody slaughter ancient tomb was controlled by the corpse demon lord, a master of illusion. It was almost impossible to find another master of illusion in the 3,000 small realms. Martial uncle, have you entered the chaotic abyss before? Wang Haoshuan suddenly asked. Yao Fik shook his head and said, Rumor has it that the chaotic abyss is the entrance to the demonic world from the human world. The time it opens every time is uncertain. The last time it opened was more than 10 years ago, but the commotion at that time was very small. Only a small entrance was opened. Not many cultivators knew about it, so even fewer cultivators entered the abyss. The last time it opened was several hundred years ago. It was even longer than now. At this point, Yao Fei paused and continued, "This time, the commotion of the chaotic abyss opening is too big. Not only the Northern Sea, but the other 3 regions and Sumi Ling City will also know. It seems that Chaos City will be very lively." As Nie Tian listened to Yao Fei's description, his eyes slowly became passionate. The chaotic abyss was indeed a very suitable place to train. "Martial uncle, then we..." Wang Haoshuan's eyes also showed great interest. He licked his slightly dry lips, wanting to say something but hesitating. "Haoshuan, if you want to go to the chaotic abyss, I am willing to go with you." Yao Fei naturally knew what Wang Haoshuan was thinking and said directly. The opening of the chaotic abyss was a great temptation to any cultivator. Not only Wang Haoshuan wanted to go, but Yao Fei also wanted to go. Furthermore, he was a spirit formation master. Since the chaotic abyss was an ancient ruin, the various restrictions and formations were even more attractive to him. Although Wang Haoshuan was a prince, he was also a cultivator. With such a good opportunity in the chaotic abyss, he naturally would not miss it. If he was not careful, he might accidentally bring out a heaven-ranked martial technique or a rank 9 spirit pill from the chaotic abyss. By then, his strength would definitely undergo an earth-shattering transformation. At that time, he would no longer have to fear the crown prince and the state preceptor. As long as he was strong enough, even if the crown prince became the emperor, he could still pull him down from the throne. Without a doubt, Wang Haoshuan regarded the chaotic abyss as an opportunity to defeat the crown prince and the imperial tutor. Now that the emperor was being controlled, if Wang Haoshuan did not do anything, then he would just be sitting and waiting for death. When Wang Haorui became the emperor, the first one to be destroyed would be him. Therefore, he was prepared to head to the chaotic abyss and take a gamble. Once he succeeded, he would have a bargaining chip to contend with the crown prince. At this time, Wang Haoshuan turned his gaze to Nie Tian and said, "Nie Tian City Lord, I presume you are also very interested in the chaotic abyss. How about we travel together?" "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness, but I like to be alone. Let's forget about traveling together." Nie Tian smiled faintly and refused without hesitation. Wang Haoshuan was slightly stunned. He clearly did not expect Nie Tian to refuse so decisively. Logically speaking, Wang Haoshuan had a powerhouse like Yao Fei accompanying him, so Nie Tian should be eager to travel with them. However, the latter actually refused without any leeway, which was puzzling. When the chaotic abyss opened, all the major forces would definitely move upon hearing the news. If Nie Tian wanted to enter the chaotic abyss with his own strength, it was almost impossible. Chaos City would definitely not allow too many people to enter the chaotic abyss. Those who could ultimately obtain a quota to enter would definitely be some major forces. Although Nie Tian's reputation as the Heaven Luo City Lord was well known, it was still far from the 4 major domains and the Sumeru Spirit Capital's forces. Nie Tian did not want to talk nonsense with Wang Haoshuan, so he stood up and said, "Xian King, although I did not see the great Chu Emperor today, the deal between us is still valid. I will still kill that person. I will temporarily trouble Your Highness to take care of those girls. When I return from Chaos City, I will take them away. Farewell." Finishing, Nie Tian did not stay any longer and immediately left with Guden and Duanmulu. Wang Haoshuan looked at Nie Tian's figure and said in his heart, "Nie Tian, are you so confident that you can definitely enter the chaotic abyss and come back safely? This youth is not simple." Yao Fei also looked in the direction Nie Tian disappeared in and murmured, He had long seen that Nietian's spiritual power had reached a shocking level 46. This was simply a terrifying spiritual power, because Nietian was only 16 years old. Even one of the three monstrous geniuses of the Sumeru spirit capital, Gu Qiulong, was far less terrifying than Nietian's spiritual power. Wang Haoxuan nodded and sighed. He once defeated 3 of my first-level true element martial artists in one move. And Yao Feike's face stiffened and he was speechless for a long time. He did not expect that in addition to Nietian's terrifying spiritual power, his combat strength was also so strange. Defeating 3 first-level true element martial artists with the strength of a third-level giant was simply too inconceivable. Yao Feiku already did not know how to describe Nietian's talent. He had seen the 3 monstrous geniuses of the Sumeru spirit capital, but at this time he had a feeling that in front of Nietian, those 3 were far from being comparable. This child is not ordinary. After a long time, Yao Feiku said in a daze. Wang Haoxuan looked at Yao Feiku and did not know what to say for a moment. He knew that Yao Feiku had always had a very high standard for judging people. To give such a high evaluation of Nietian was simply seeing a ghost. After leaving the Xian King Manor, Nietian and the other 2 came to the Sunrise Tea House. Nietian let Duanmu Lu go find Gu Huio and ask if the latter was interested in going to the Chaotic Abyss. If he was interested, then they could go together. If not, then he would let Duanmu Lu bid farewell to his future wife. Boss Nietian, you didn't see the emperor in the palace today? Guden and Nietian were waiting for Duanmu Lu to return at the tea house. The former asked with a smile. It doesn't matter whether I saw him or not. Nietian smiled faintly. Today's trip to the palace, although he did not see the emperor, Nietian had obtained information that he was interested in. It could be considered a worthwhile trip. Next, he prepared to go to the Chaotic Abyss first. The matter of the Great Chu Empire was temporarily put aside. In any case, those girls were temporarily safe. The Chaotic Abyss, the ancient battlefield of gods and demons, the passage between the human world and the demon world. How could Nietian miss this kind of place? Boss Nietian, are you really going to the Chaotic Abyss? Guden looked at the somewhat excited Nietian, but there was a deep fear in his eyes as he asked in a trembling voice. Nietian noticed that there was something wrong with Guden's gaze. It seemed like he wanted to say something but was hesitating. He could not help but frown slightly and said, Brother Guden, if you have something to say, just say it. If you don't want to go, I won't force you. Chapter 437. You've been to the Chaos Abyss? Nietian was taken aback. Yes. Guden nodded heavily. That was 13 years ago. I was still a young lad with only the first layer of the giant spirit realm. I followed a mercenary group and entered the Chaotic Abyss without knowing anything. There were 17 of us, but only 2 of us came out alive. Guden recalled the past and his expression became slightly solemn. What happened to you guys in the Chaotic Abyss? Nietian was very interested and asked. Very terrifying. Guden swallowed his saliva and said, There really are demons in the Chaotic Abyss. Ever since we entered the Abyss, we began our endless escape. Fortunately, Big Brother Tang found an exit from the Abyss. That's why he and I didn't die. Big Brother Tang? Nietian was slightly startled. The one who entered the Chaotic Abyss with you was surnamed Tang. Yes. Guden nodded. Big Brother Tang is a very good person and seems to have a very high status. He is related to Sumi Spirit Capital's Tang clan. But Big Brother Tang and I only met briefly. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't have been able to come out. More than 10 years ago, the opening of the Chaotic Abyss was extremely small and not many people knew about it. Unlike now, the commotion is too big and the entire 3,000 small worlds know about it. The big commotion means that the Chaotic Abyss has completely opened. Perhaps this time there will be more things to show to the world. Nietian faintly smiled and asked, How about it? Do you want to go to the chaotic abyss again? Gooden hesitated as he remembered the terrifying things, but he finally made up his mind and fiercely drank a mouthful of tea. Yes. Okay. Nye Tian laughed and said, martial artists must have a fearless heart. If we are afraid of a mere chaotic abyss, how can we climb to the pinnacle of the martial way? Since you could come out of the chaotic abyss alive last time, you can do the same this time. Yes. Of course. My Gooden's luck isn't just for show. I can always meet a benefactor. Big Brother Tang is my benefactor, and Boss Nye Tian is also my benefactor. Gooden chuckled, immediately becoming full of confidence. Boss Nye Tian, how do we enter the chaotic abyss? The commotion in the chaotic abyss had been too big this time. Most likely, the various major powers were rushing over to Chaos City. They definitely won't let too many people enter the chaotic abyss. I reckon that it will be difficult for us to obtain a spot to enter the chaotic abyss, Gooden immediately said worriedly. Let's go to Chaos City first. Maybe some great force will take a fancy to our strength and be willing to bring us in. Nye Tian smiled faintly and comfortably took a sip of tea. He wasn't worried at all. Chaos City, another extremely perilous place among the 3,000 small world. This place was not under the control of the 4 great families or other forces. It was more like a free city. Of course, even free cities had their own managers. It was rumored that the city lord of Chaos City was a big shot who could stand shoulder to shoulder with the heads of the 4 great families. However, no one had ever seen this city lord. Only the deputy city lord appeared to manage everything in Chaos City. The opening of the chaotic abyss would alarm all the major powers. Chaos City couldn't let everyone enter the chaotic abyss, so when the time came, there would definitely be an intense competition for the spots to enter. Most likely, only the major powers would be allowed to enter. Nye Tian guessed that the Tang family would definitely send people. He had the Tang family's inner court token, so it shouldn't be difficult for him to get a few spots in the Tang family's army. A moment later, Duanmu Lu returned. Gu Wuyo appeared with him. Gu Wuyo had a huge hatred in her heart. She still wanted to avenge her parents, so of course she wouldn't miss this opportunity to enter the chaotic abyss. Nye Tian City Lord, when are we going to Chaos City? Gu Wuyo was even more anxious than Nye Tian, and directly asked. Nye Tian went blank for a moment before smiling and saying, no matter what, you're still the commander of the Imperial Guard. Aren't you deserting your post? What commander of the Imperial Guards? However, Gu Wuyo's face was filled with anger as he said, my position as commander is dispensable. The other vice-commanders have never placed me in their eyes. They are far stronger than me and usually treat me as a decoration. I don't want to be this bullshit commander anymore. Nye Tian's face darkened. He said, so you already knew that your position as commander was just a decoration. Gu Wuyo snickered and said, am I that stupid? There are so many experts in Chuyang City, but they made a weak 9th-tier giant like me the commander of the Imperial Guards. They clearly want to use this position to keep me in Chuyang City. Nye Tian couldn't help but laugh. He didn't expect that Gu Wuyo had already seen through all this, but just didn't say it. Actually, it was true. If Gu Wuyo couldn't even see such an obvious thing, how could she become the only female general of Great Chu? Gu Wuyo didn't plan to say more, so Nye Tian didn't ask anymore. The 4 didn't stop. After leaving Sun Ascension Tea House, they immediately headed for Chaos City. Half a day later. This is the legendary Chaos City. Gu Wuyo pointed to a huge black stone city in front of her, and couldn't help but look excited. Although she was from the Great Chu Empire, and the Great Chu Empire was just next to Chaos City, this was her first time coming to Chaos City. Ekface was someone who had been to Chaos City before. He said, Chaos City is always covered with thick clouds at any time, so the whole city is dark even during the day. Nye Tian looked at the city not far away. He vaguely felt that Chaos City seemed to be enveloped in a huge formation. The sky above the city was covered with thick black clouds, as if it was going to swallow everything in the city. This was an ancient city. The city walls were built with huge stones that were hundreds of meters tall. This was the architectural style of the ancient times. Nie Tian guessed that Chaos City should be a big city in the ancient times. After being repaired by modern people, it became what it was today. In the ancient times, every big city had a city protecting grand array. During that period, it was rumored that there were a lot of Tier 9 spirit array masters. Hence, the city protecting grand array of the big cities was a Tier 9 spirit array, which was abnormally sturdy. Even a heavenly Emperor realm martial artist could forget about breaking the city protecting grand array. Nie Tian guessed that the reason why the sky above Chaos City was covered with thick black clouds all year round was because of the residual formation power. His current spiritual power was too low to feel the mystery of the formation in the protective formation. He could only faintly sense the existence of the residual formation aura. The four moved quickly, and in a flash, they arrived at the gate of Chaos City. As they approached the gate, Nie Tian could feel that the formation aura was very strong, and the black clouds above their heads gave people a strong sense of oppression, making it hard for them to breathe. There were no guards at the gate, so the four entered the city directly. Nie Tian, I finally found you. Just when the four of them entered the city, a huge four-winged griffin suddenly appeared in the sky, and a cold voice came. Chapter 438. Nie Tian's face darkened when he saw the cold, gloomy face on the four-winged lion. It wasn't a good thing to meet such a big enemy right after coming to Chaos City. Whoosh! The four-winged griffin landed on an empty ground not far away, setting off a strong gust of wind and raising a cloud of dust. The four-winged griffin was a rank 5 spirit beast. It was 100 meters long, with a lion's head and bird's body. Its brown feathers were blazing like flames. It looked very majestic and gave people a strong sense of oppression. Nie Tian had seen this spirit beast before. Back in Moyang City, the Mo family used the four-winged griffin to pick up Mo Rushi and the others. Nie Tian still remembered Mo Rushi's expression when she left, so he didn't have a good impression of this beast. Roar! The four-winged griffin let out an angry roar. It was a bit like a lion, but also a bit like a bird. It was neither fish nor fowl. Diao Jingde stood at the front of the griffin and stared at Nie Tian, as if he was afraid that Nie Tian would run away. Behind him were a dozen black-clothed warriors and a dozen young alchemists. It's actually a four-winged griffin. It must be a big shot. Of course it's a big shot. Didn't you see their clothes? That's an alchemist's robe. The warriors' clothes seemed to be the uniform of the Elixir Martial Imperial Guards. They must be big shots from the Alchemist Guild. The Chaos Abyss has just opened, and the Alchemist Guild is already here. This is too fast. What fast? Let's wait. The people from the four major families will appear soon. With such a big commotion in the Chaos Abyss, there will be a good show to watch. The appearance of the four-winged griffin attracted the surrounding people to gather and discuss in whispers. Nie Tian looked at Diao Jingde and cursed his bad luck in his heart. To meet this guy in such a place, he won't let those Elixir Martial Imperial Guards attack me, right? Nie Tian observed the Dan Wu Imperial Guards on the four-winged griffin. There were 16 true Energy Realm martial artists, and there was even a middle-aged man with a murderous expression. He couldn't tell how strong he was, but judging from his aura, he should be a Spirit Wheel Realm martial artist. A Divine Wheel Realm martial artist should be at the commander level of the Dan Martial Hall, just like Zhao Kuo, who appeared at the Dragon Blood Martial Group previously. Diao Jingde jumped down from the four-winged griffin and went straight to Nie Tian's side. He stared at Nie Tian with a pair of cold eyes and said with a hint of surprise, Nie Tian, you're quite lucky to have survived until now. Nie Tian's guess was right. The assassins from the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion were hired by Diao Jingde. Therefore, Diao Jingde was very surprised that Nie Tian was still alive and even appeared in Chaos Theory City. Nie Tian faintly smiled and said, Master Diao, it seems that those people who like to randomly give out tokens to others were invited by you. What are you talking about? This master doesn't understand. Diao Jingde was slightly startled and immediately smiled. Of course, he wouldn't admit it. If others knew that he hired the assassins from the Lingxian Heaven Pavilion to deal with Nie Tian, the one who would be in trouble wouldn't be Nie Tian, but himself. A red-cloved elder of the Alchemist Association actually had a relationship with the Lingxian Heaven Pavilion. Once this information was leaked, his red-cloved elder's career would come to an end. It doesn't matter if you don't admit it. Anyway, I will return those tokens one by one. Perhaps one day, I'll be able to obtain the legendary Black Emperor Command token. Nie Tian faintly smiled. From Diao Jingde's reaction, he could tell that the latter must have a great relationship with the Lingxian Heaven Pavilion. Naive. Diao Jingde smiled cold, but in his heart he was cursing. Are those assassins eating sh*t? The pavilion master nurtured you guys to kill people, but you can't even kill a mere youth. What a bunch of pigs. Master Diao, who is this person? At this moment, the middle-aged man walked over and glanced at Nie Tian with a cold gaze as he asked in an indifferent tone. Commander Wu, this is the famous Heaven Luo City Lord, Nie Tian. Diao Jingde's eyes turned, and a strange smile flashed across the corner of his mouth. Fifth Commander. Hearing how Diao Jingde addressed the middle-aged man, Nie Tian was slightly moved. He heard from Gu Yi that the Elixir Martial Hall had a Hall Master, 2 Deputy Hall Masters, and 17 Commanders. These people were all at the Divine Wheel realm. Among them, the Hall Masters were all above the 5th level of the Divine Wheel, and the main Hall Master was close to the 9th level of the Divine Wheel. The 9th level of the Divine Wheel was already the pinnacle force of the 3,000 small world. In the entire 3,000 small worlds, there were only over 100 Divine Wheel Realm martial artists on the surface. For the Elixir Martial Hall to have 20 Divine Wheel Realm martial artists, it was enough to show their strength, which was comparable to any of the 4 major clans. But this time, Nie Tian heard wrongly. This Commander Wu was called Wu Mang, and he was the 8th commander of the Elixir Martial Hall, not the 5th commander. He is the Heaven Luo City Lord, the chief of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. Wu Mang stared at Nie Tian with a malicious gaze. He is the Heaven Luo City Lord? That's impossible. Yes, the Heaven Luo City Lord is the chief of the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. How can he be a child? I heard that even the geniuses of Sumi Spirit Capital went to the Dragon Blood Martial Meet. Could this youth be stronger than the geniuses of Sumi Spirit Capital? The surrounding people also started discussing, and they looked at Nie Tian with a strange gaze. Master Diao, if you have nothing else to say, then get out of the way. I still have things to do. Nie Tian's identity had already been exposed, and he didn't want to stay any longer. He had a feud with Diao Jingde for killing his son, but this was Chaos City. With so many people watching, Diao Jingde wouldn't publicly use the power of the Alchemist Guild to kill him. That would be too shameless. Unfortunately, Nie Tian really thought wrong this time. Diao Jingde smiled coldly and transmitted his voice to Wu Mang, saying, Commander Wu, this kid has a lot of dragon blood on him. This master knows that you cultivate the Azure Dragon Golden Sun art. The value of that dragon blood to you is extraordinary. Don't you want it? Master Diao, I am the commander of the Dan Wu Hall after all. I'm afraid it's not good to snatch it like this. Wu Mang laughed dryly and transmitted his voice back. However, his gaze when looking at Nie Tian was even more greedy. Diao Jingde smiled sinisterly and shouted, Nie Tian, you humiliated this master in public. How can this master let you leave? The dignity of the Alchemist Guild cannot be challenged by anyone. And, when everyone heard Diao Jingde's words, they were instantly baffled. Nie Tian didn't say anything. When did he humiliate him? Even Wu Mang was stunned. He immediately understood that Diao Jingde was creating a reason for him to make a move. What a venomous slander! How could Nye Tian not understand Diao Zhengda's meaning? Just now, he saw the latter and Wu Mang pause for a moment. They must have transmitted their voices to each other. He didn't expect that a dignified red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Guild would be so shameless. In front of everyone, he directly made venomous slanderous slander out of nothing. This kind of shameless spirit was so great that it was born in the womb. Chapter 439. An indifferent scolding came out of Nye Tian's mouth. Diao Zhengda's and Wu Mang's faces froze at the same time, but there was a smile amidst the gloominess. They did not expect that Nye Tian actually dared to humiliate Diao Zhengda, and in front of so many people. If Diao Zhengda was slandering people earlier, then it was dignified now. The surrounding crowd was also stunned. Their gazes when looking at Nye Tian were astonished, fearful, and reverent. People who dared to humiliate the Alchemist Association's red-clothed elder in public, looking at the entire 3,000 small worlds, there were not many. "Little bastard, you really dare to scold me?" Diao Zhengda's old face was dark, his muscles trembling, wishing that he could go forward and tear Nye Tian into pieces. But his strength was lacking. If he made a move personally, he might be torn into pieces by Nye Tian instead. He knew that Nye Tian was a person who feared nothing in the world. "So what if I scold you? You're just a mad dog that bites people on sight. I know that Luo Fun is your illegitimate son. Those people from the Luo family were not killed by Luo Fun at all, it was you who killed them. It was you who personally forced your own son to become a murderous madman. People like you, no matter how dirty it is to scold you, I find it too dirty." Nye Tian's expression was icy, without the slightest fear. He heard some things about Luo Fun from Gui, and had even less of a favorable impression towards Diao Zhengda, this fellow. Luo Fun becoming like that was actually single-handedly caused by Diao Zhengda. Forcing his own son to become a murderous maniac, this kind of father was worse than a pig or a dog. Scolding Diao Zhengda as an old pig or a dog was insulting the two words pig or dog. "Stinking brat, you're courting death." Having his scar poked, Diao Zhengda was enraged, and actually charged straight at Nye Tian. Bang! Nye Tian directly punched out. Diao Zhengda flew out backward at a speed even faster than when he came. Although Diao Zhengda was a Tier 6 alchemist, his strength was only at the 9th level of the myriad phenomenon realm. In front of Nye Tian, he was worse than trash. Being weak was a common problem among alchemists. After all, they spent most of their time improving their mental strength and familiarizing themselves with medicinal herbs. There were very few people like Nye Tian who had reached the peak of both alchemy and martial arts. Seeing Diao Zhengda fall to the ground, everyone was stunned. There was actually someone who dared to make a move on a red-robed elder of the Apothecary Guild in front of so many people. This was simply too ridiculous and exciting. Heaven Luo City Lord Nye Tian's current action was equivalent to humiliating the Alchemist Guild. Wasn't he afraid of the Alchemist Guild's fury? To be honest, Nye Tian was really not afraid. He wasn't afraid of anyone, and Heaven Luo City had Di Shi, the ancient golden dragon soul, guarding it, so he wasn't afraid at all. In this way, Nye Tian had nothing to worry about. Of course, he wasn't afraid of anything. Diao Zhengda crawled up with difficulty. His face was swollen like a pig's head. Nye Tian's punch, just now, had actually landed on his face. When everyone saw Diao Zhengda's miserable appearance, they then recalled Nye Tian's words just now and started discussing in low voices. Nye Tian City Lord said just now that Luo Fun is Master Diao's illegitimate child. I wonder if it's true? I don't think Nye Tian City Lord is someone who makes things up out of nothing. I heard that Luo Fun is the #1 genius of the Nanshan region. He's usually arrogant and despotic, offending many major forces, but he can still live safely. There must be a big shot behind him. I didn't expect that he actually has an illegitimate father. Luo Fun is incomparably ruthless. He slaughtered his own clansmen. This might not be true. Nie Tian City Lord said that it was done by Master Diao. It seems to be true. Waves of whispers entered Diao Jingda's ears, but it was like a clap of thunder, blasting his entire body until it was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside. The matter that he tried his best to hide was publicly exposed by Nie Tian. It probably wouldn't take long before it would spread throughout the 3,000 small world. How would he still have the face to see people then? When he thought of this, Diao Jingda simply felt the blood in his entire body flow in reverse. He roared angrily, "Commander Wu, what are you still waiting for?" Wu Mang only reacted at this time. If he didn't witness it with his own eyes, he really wouldn't believe that there would be such an arrogant person like Nie Tian in this world. Not only did he humiliate Diao Jingda in public, he actually beat him into a pig's head with one punch. This brat was simply boundlessly arrogant. Little bastard, beating up the Alchemist Association's red-cloved elder in public, you're tired of living. Wu Mang stepped forward and roared angrily. Immediately, a powerful pressure almost condensed into substance, like an invisible giant beast, directly enveloping Nie Tian, trapping him firmly. Wu Mang was no longer probing, but wanted to completely put Nie Tian to death. Under Wu Mang's powerful pressure, Nie Tian's face immediately flushed red. He instantly felt like he couldn't breathe, and he couldn't even use the slightest bit of origin energy. To the current him, a spirit wheel realm expert was too powerful. There was no way he could resist it. Teacher! Nie Tian City Lord! Boss Nie Tian! Duanmu Lu, Gu Wuyo, and Gooden exclaimed at the same time. Their faces turned deathly pale. No matter how strong Nie Tian was, no matter how strange his strength was, it was impossible for him to contend against a spirit wheel realm expert. Don't come over! Nie Tian shouted with all his might. At this moment, even if Duanmu Lu and the other two made a move, it would be useless. They would only become a burden. Master! Inside the primal chaos origin coffin, the corpse demon monarch's voice sounded. Shortly after, a surge of origin energy gushed out, causing the invisible giant hand that enveloped Nie Tian to loosen a little. Although the corpse demon monarch couldn't unleash the strength of a true essence realm expert, he could still condense a bit of origin energy. Wu Mang sensed that a surge of origin energy actually appeared on Nie Tian's body, and he instantly frowned. The other spectators also looked at each other in dismay. They couldn't understand what was going on. Nie Tian was clearly only at the 3rd level of the giant spirit realm. How could there be origin energy gushing out of his body? This was simply absurd. This kid's strength is a bit strange. I have to kill him. If I let him live, he will definitely be a huge threat in the future. Wu Mang thought of this point, and a ruthless expression immediately appeared on his face. His aura pressure increased once again. It can't be, right? Could it be that the Dan Marshall Hall's commander wants to use his aura pressure to suppress the Nie Tian City Lord until he explodes? This is too shameless. He is a spirit wheel realm expert. Isn't it too shameless to attack a giant spirit realm expert? Someone whispered. Who would have thought that the dignified Dan Marshall Hall's commander was actually a shameless villain who used his strength to bully the weak? When Wu Mang heard the discussion, his face alternated between green and red. He roared sternly, "Little bastard, you humiliated Master Diao in public. Now, take out the dragon blood in your body as an apology, cripple your own essence meridians, and kowtow to Master Diao 30 times to admit your guilt. Then, this commander will spare your life." Dragon blood. A trace of blood flowed out from the corner of Nie Tian's mouth. He immediately understood that this commander wanted the dragon blood in his body. For a mere few drops of dragon blood, he actually killed someone in public. This commander was simply inhumane. "Commander Wu, aren't you being too magnanimous to treat this kid like this?" Diao Jingda's swollen pig head sneered, and his eyes were filled with mockery. The enemy who killed his son was about to die tragically in front of him. This feeling of revenge was truly refreshing. Chapter 440. Nietian roared. His eyes were filled with endless anger, murderous intent, and unyielding. However, there was no fear in his eyes. The heart of a martial artist could not tolerate the slightest bit of sand. The most taboo thing was to kneel to others. In his previous life, Nietian had only knelt to 3 people. He knelt to his father, his mother, and his teacher. Apart from these 3, even the heavens would not kneel. Even Emperor Chenin never dared to ask Nietian to kneel. A mere trashy commander from the 3,000 small worlds actually wanted him to kneel. Wishful thinking. Wu Mang frowned when he saw that Nietian was extremely arrogant and showed no signs of yielding. Everyone was infected by Nietian's bold and unrestrained arrogance. They felt their blood boiling. One only lives once, and one's pride lasts forever. Good lad, it seems that you are still a piece of jade that would rather be broken than sullied, a sword that would rather be broken than bent. Wu Mang smiled coldly. The murderous intent in his eyes was revealed as he sneered. Since you are so stubborn, then don't blame me for being ruthless. If you want to die, I will let you die. However, Wu Mang looked at Nietian with a sinister smile and said, I will not let you die so easily. Kneel before this commander. Suddenly, Wu Mang raised his voice. His furious voice rumbled through the air. Crack, crack. Suddenly, the terrifying pressure exerted on Nietian suddenly increased. There was actually the sound of bones breaking in the air. The strength of a spirit wheel expert was too terrifying. Nietian had no power to fight back. His body was squeezed inwards by an invisible force. His face was bloodshot and scarlet, as if it was going to explode in the next moment. Teacher! Duanmu Lu could no longer control himself. The 8 extremities Kunwu appeared. The huge sword flipped in the air and let out a deep sword cry as it pressed towards Wu Mang. Courting death. In the face of Duanmu Lu's all-out attack, Wu Mang casually waved his hand and a powerful force whizzed out. In the next moment, Duanmu Lu was sent flying. When he landed on the ground, his entire body was covered in blood, and he lay unconscious on the ground. Blockhead! Gu Wuyo howled and pounced towards Duanmu Lu. Master, I can't hold on any longer. Within the primal chaos original coffin, corpse demon Monarch screamed in pain and fainted. The true essence on Nietian's body immediately disappeared. Kneel! When Wu Mang saw this scene, he shouted fiercely and laughed wildly. His aura rose explosively once more. He was determined to make Nietian kneel. An even more violent force pressed down, and Nietian's body suddenly sank, his calves directly sinking into the ground. His elemental meridians were under immense pressure, as if they would explode at any moment. Pain. In an instant, Nietian felt a searing pain that penetrated deep into his bones. It was as if his body was about to be torn apart. This was the terrifying strength of a spirit wheel practitioner. Just the terrifying pressure alone was unbearable for Nietian. Although Nietian only had the strength of a giant spirit 3rd layer, he had the power of 2.56 million stars in his body. His martial body was not any weaker than a true energy realm practitioner. But even so, he was unable to break through the powerful aura of a spirit wheel practitioner. What to do? At the moment of life and death, Nietian suddenly became calm. He knew that if he knelt down, the pain in his body would be alleviated. But would he kneel? Absolutely not. The path of martial arts could not tolerate the slightest bit of sand. If he knelt today, his heart of martial arts would definitely be covered in dust. So, he definitely could not kneel. At this moment, Nietian's body suddenly released a golden halo, which actually caused Wu Mang's pressure to relax a little. This golden halo was the dragon scale energy that Di Shi had poured into Nietian's body. The dragon scale energy came from the golden dragon emperor's heart-protecting dragon scale. The heart-protecting dragon scale was the reverse scale of a dragon. Touching it meant death. Even if it was just a trace of the dragon scale energy, it was unimaginably terrifying. The dragon scale energy caused Wu Mang's pressure to loosen. The next moment, the sealed essence meridians in Nie Tian's body began to revolve wildly. Endless essence energy and star power surged out. Roar! With a thought, the 9 extreme chaos beast in his body sensed it and suddenly let out a roar. Surging power instantly erupted. The 9 extreme chaos beast had always been subdued by all beings. There was no reason for it to kneel. The majestic roar was like a clap of thunder that shook everyone's heart. At this moment, Wu Mang suddenly felt an inexplicable tremble. The essence spirit in his body seemed to feel some kind of threat and trembled violently. All the martial artists present had the same trembling feeling. That was a kind of natural reverence when facing a supreme emperor. I, Nie Tian, will never kneel. At the same time, Nie Tian let out a deep roar, each word sonorous. The 9 extreme chaos beast surged out of his body, and scarlet halos appeared one after another, each stronger than the one before. At this moment, Nie Tian suddenly looked up. His body shook, and the huge power that enveloped his body was instantly broken. Roar! A roar resounded through the heavens and the earth. A giant beast that was as red as blood appeared in front of everyone. Its body was as majestic as a mountain, and its color was as red as blood. Its aura was as majestic as the sea, and it was domineering and majestic. It was like a supreme emperor that walked out of the ancient world. It made people have the urge to kneel and worship it. This was a kind of aura, a kind of unparalleled aura. As the king of the world, who could compete with it? Wu Mang's aura was broken, and he took a few steps back. He looked at the blood-red giant beast in front of him with a trace of fear. Nie Tian fiercely spat out a mouthful of black blood. A pair of firm eyes stared at Wu Mang fearlessly, and he said word by word, "You still want me to kneel?" Wu Mang had a dumbfounded look, as if he was in a dream. He clearly knew that Nie Tian only had the strength of a giant spirit level 3. How could he break through his aura pressure? With Wu Mang's current strength, even a true essence level 5 martial artist would find it difficult to break through his aura pressure. How did Nie Tian do it? And this blood-red giant beast essence spirit in front of him, this aura that looked down on the heavens and earth, actually made his essence spirit feel threatened. He was a dignified spirit wheel powerhouse, but he actually felt threatened in front of a giant spirit realm martial artist. What the hell? Everything was too strange. It was far beyond Wu Mang's understanding of martial Dao. Wu Mang was not the only one who felt that it was inconceivable. Everyone's mind went blank. Looking at the blood-red giant beast, they couldn't make a sound for a long time. Nie Tian put away the 9th extreme chaos beast essence spirit, and the aura around his body dissipated. He had already broken through Wu Mang's aura pressure. If the latter still had the slightest bit of shame, he wouldn't make a move again. A dignified spirit wheel powerhouse had his aura pressure broken by a giant spirit realm martial artist. This was already embarrassing enough. If he continued to make a move, then he really didn't have any face left. However, Nie Tian still underestimated the thickness of Commander Wu Mang's face. Diao Jingde and Wu Mang looked at each other and actually nodded shamelessly. Commander Wu, who is so arrogant that it's actually worthy for you to personally make a move. Right at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in the air with a hint of ridicule. And Nie Tian raised his head and saw another four-winged griffin appear. And the face sitting at the very front was actually very familiar. Mo family's outer sect elder, Mo Feng. Chapter 441. When Nie Tian saw the face of the person above, his pale little face turned gloomy. He didn't expect that he would actually encounter Mo Feng in Chaos City. Mo Feng also saw Nie Tian at this moment. His old face that originally carried a smile suddenly turned gloomy. Nie Tian was surprised, and Mo Feng was even more surprised. But more than that, Mo Feng felt astonishment. When he first met Nie Tian, it was just over half a year ago. At that time, Nie Tian was just a second-level origin spirit realm trash, a complete ant. But in just half a year, the second-level origin spirit realm ant actually grew to the third-level giant spirit realm strength. Just half a year's time, and Nie Tian's strength actually rose by 2 major realms. Previously, when he heard that Nie Tian obtained the Dragonblood Martial Meets Champion, Mo Feng thought that he had heard wrongly. Perhaps Heaven Luo City's Lord Nie Tian and Moyang City's Nie Tian were 2 different people. Only now did he know that Nie Tian was this Nie Tian. Mo Feng knew that there were a few Sumeru spirit capital geniuses who went to the Dragonblood Martial Meet to join in the fun. Although those few people were far from MOU, they were considered not weak among the younger generation. Nie Tian could actually obtain the Martial Meets Champion under the circumstances where these few people participated. The terror of his strength was indescribable. The few people that Mo Feng mentioned were Tang Xiao, Qiu Shaokong, Gu Qilin, and the others. However, what he didn't know was that these 3 people didn't even enter the top 4 of the Dragonblood Martial Meet. The real opponents that Nie Tian encountered in the Martial Meet were much stronger than these 3 fellows. At this moment, when Mo Feng saw that Nie Tian actually fought with the Dan Martial Hall's commander, even his lungs were dumbfounded. One had to know that the Dan Martial Hall's commanders were all Divine Wheel Realm experts. Not long ago, MOU had also broken through to the Divine Wheel Realm. However, if he were to fight with the commander of the Dan Martial Hall, he would really have to think twice. Mo Feng had always believed that there was no problem with the 3-year appointment between Nie Tian and MOU, because MOU's growth was too fast. In 3 years, he would almost be able to rise to the top of the 3,000 small world. But now that he saw Nie Tian, he realized that Nie Tian's growth was much faster than MOU's. Therefore, it wasn't that there wasn't a problem with the arranged battle between the 2 of them. In fact, there was a huge problem. In just half a year's time, Nie Tian had already advanced by a whole 2 realms. If he was given another 2.5 years, who knew to what extent this fellow would grow to? At this moment, Mo Feng was deeply afraid of Nie Tian. He had never imagined that the little loach that he used to see as rotten in the mud would really turn the sky upside down. Thinking of this, a cold killing intent appeared on Mo Feng's face. Elder Mo Feng. Wu Meng saw that the person who came was Mo Feng and faintly smiled. The 2 were obviously old acquaintances. It seemed that the Mo family's team entering the abyss of chaos this time was led by Mo Feng. Really, enemies were bound to meet on a narrow road. He had just arrived at the City of Chaos and already met Nie Tian. What? Does Elder Mo Feng also know the Nie Tian City Lord? Diao Jingde saw that Mo Feng and Nie Tian seemed to know each other. Fearing that the latter would ruin his good deeds, he asked with a sinister smile. Mo Feng glanced at Nie Tian, faintly smiled, and said, "The Nie Tian City Lord is now a celebrity in the 3,000 small worlds. Who doesn't know him? This old man and the Nie Tian City Lord have met once in the past, but there is absolutely no friendship between us. If Grandmaster Diao wants to do something, just do it. This old man just wants to be a spectator." The meaning of Mo Feng's words was very clear. Diao Jingde could do whatever he wanted. The life and death of Nie Tian had nothing to do with him. With Diao Jingde's shrewdness, he could faintly see that not only would Mo Feng not interfere, but he also seemed to be looking forward to Nie Tian's death. Of course, Mo Feng hoped that Nie Tian would die now. Otherwise, the Mo family might have an unusually powerful enemy in the future. As a Mo family elder, it was inconvenient for him to deal with Nie Tian, but Diao Jingde's murderous intent was just right to borrow his hand to get rid of Nie Tian. "Brat, you have really offended a lot of people. Even the Mo family's people are looking forward to your death. This time, this master has no more scruples." Diao Jingde looked at Nie Tian and sneered in his heart. The corner of his mouth curled up into a cold, murderous intent. He glanced at Wu Mang, and the latter immediately understood. Wow! It's so lively here. However, before Wu Mang could make a move, another voice sounded in the sky. Immediately after, another four-winged griffin appeared. Everyone looked up at the same time. On the four-winged griffin in the sky stood a lean man with a mustache. Whoosh! This man actually directly jumped down from a height of several hundred meters. His figure was like lightning, but he landed silently. Master Diao, Commander Wu, Brother Mo, you are in a good mood to actually gather here. That person appeared in front of everyone. A pair of cold eyes swept over Diao Jingde, Wu Mang, and Mo Feng, and finally landed on Nie Tian. Chiu Wuhan. Diao Jingde and the others saw the person's face clearly and shouted his name. This person's surname was Chiu, and he was a member of the Sumi spiritual city's Chiu family. His name was Chiu Wuhan, and he was the Chiu family's outer sect elder. This time, the Chiu family's team was led by him. Of the four great families, Tang Mo and Gu Chiu, two had already arrived. Everyone's expression became surprised. It was rare to see two great families gather. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this time, another two figures jumped down from the sky and appeared beside Chiu Wuhan. These two figures were very young, looking only about 20 years old. One of them Nie Tian had seen before. It was Chiu Shaokong who appeared at the Dragon Blood martial meet. Nie Tian still remembered that this guy only entered the top 16 of the martial meet. He didn't even enter the top 8, and was finally eliminated by Zhang Xiaoi. Chiu Shaokong's strength was at the first level of true essence, and Zhang Xiaoi was at the 9th level of giant spirit. But the latter had the battle cloud tyrant body, so Chiu Shaokong lost. The other person's appearance was somewhat similar to Chiu Shaokong. He was slightly more mature and stronger than him. He was actually at the 3rd level of true essence. Nie Tian guessed that this person should be Chiu Shaokong's elder brother. Nie Tian, why is it you? Chiu Shaokong saw Nie Tian at a glance and was quite surprised. Why can't it be me? Nie Tian smiled faintly. You are the champion of the Dragon Blood martial meet? Chiu Wuhan sized up Nie Tian and was slightly surprised. He laughed coldly. I didn't expect that a mere 3rd-level giant spirit martial artist could actually take down the champion of the Dragon Blood martial meet. No wonder the Nie Tian city lord is so insolent. Can I take this as a compliment? Nie Tian raised his eyebrows slightly and said indifferently, besides, whether this city lord is arrogant or not doesn't seem to have anything to do with you. Chiu Wuhan, this person had a stern look in his eyes and a gloomy face. He was clearly not a good person. One look and it was clear that he was prepared to watch a good show. Nie Tian naturally did not need to be courteous with him. These people of Sumi Ling City usually thought highly of themselves. Nie Tian's sudden appearance and domineeringly taking down the champion of the Dragon Blood martial meet made the disciples of the four great families lose face. They naturally did not have a good impression of Nie Tian. Chapter 442. As soon as Nie Tian said this, the crowd couldn't help but be stunned. Who would have thought that Nie Tian still dared to talk to Chiu Wuhan so arrogantly under such circumstances? Chiu Wuhan was obviously an important figure on the same level as the commander of the Dan Martial Hall and the Mo clan elder. Nie Tian really had too many debts to worry about. He was simply going to offend the four major clans and the Alchemist Guild. Brat, it's been a long time since someone was so insolent in front of me. I'll remember you. Chiu Wuhan smiled coldly with a gloomy expression. Nie Tian glanced at Chiu Wuhan and smiled indifferently. The disdain was very obvious. Brother Chiu, are you done with your nonsense with him? Wu Mang couldn't wait any longer. Seeing that there were more and more people watching, if he didn't make a move now, he was afraid that he really wouldn't have the chance to make a move. The people who came now all wished for Nie Tian to die quickly. Who knew if there would be a few people who wanted to save Nie Tian later? Commander Wu, you can make your move now. Chiu Wuhan saw Wu Mang's killing intent. His cold eyes swept across Nie Tian with a gloomy and complacent expression. It was better to get rid of a person with infinite potential like Nie Tian as soon as possible. Wu Mang took a step forward and smiled coldly. He squeezed his voice out from the gaps of his teeth and said, "Brat, I'll give you another chance. Hand over the dragon blood, cripple your own essence meridians, and kowtow to Master Diao as an apology. Then, this commander will spare your life." At this moment, Wu Mang still had to pretend to be magnanimous. "If this is called a chance, you better leave it for yourself." Nie Tian smiled arrogantly without the slightest fear. "Brat, you are courting death." Wu Mang's expression stiffened. His whole body trembled, and an endless aura suddenly surged out. The surrounding crowd immediately retreated subconsciously. Wu Mang was really going to show his prowess this time. The strength of a spirit wheel realm expert wasn't a joke. "So much nonsense. Since you are done with your bullshit, quickly make your move." Nie Tian laughed wildly, his entire body similarly surging with a powerful aura, but compared to Wu Mang, it was thousands of miles inferior. When everyone saw that Nie Tian wasn't afraid of Wu Mang in the slightest, and from his posture, it seemed like he wanted to fight a great battle, they all revealed shocked expressions. Looking at Nie Tian, Qiu Shaokong couldn't help but whisper, "Big brother, Nie Tian's strength is very strange. From the look of it, he's not really going to fight Commander Wu head-on, is he?" Qiu Shaokong reckoned that he wouldn't be able to withstand a spirit wheel stage expert's aura, let alone resist. Nie Tian actually really wanted to fight Wu Mang. This was simply too shocking. A mere level 3 giant spirit trash actually wants to fight head-on with a spirit wheel realm warrior? You are simply courting death. The handsome young man whom Qiu Shaokong called Big Brother looked at Nie Tian cold with a disdainful expression. His name was Qiu Shaofeng, and he was Qiu Shaokong's biological big brother. Qiu Shaofeng was a level 3 true essence warrior. Even he couldn't withstand the pressure of a spirit wheel realm warrior's aura. Nie Tian, a level 3 giant spirit warrior, actually wanted to fight head-on with Wu Mang. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? "Teacher!" Duanmu Lu woke up at this moment, and when he saw this scene, he shouted loudly. "Step back!" Nie Tian roared angrily. His voice was filled with irresistible determination. Nie Tian really didn't expect that Diao Zhengde and Wu Mang's shamelessness was far beyond his expectations. Of course, he didn't want to fight with a spirit wheel realm warrior, but since the other party insisted on taking his life, what else could he do? At this moment there was only one option: fight. Sometimes, strength wasn't important. What was important was to let your enemy know of your existence. At this moment, everyone retreated to give Nie Tian and Wu Mang a few hundred meters of space to fight. With the terrifying strength of a spirit wheel realm warrior, even if one was just affected, it was no small matter. Nie Tian's figure rose into midair, and his hands formed a complicated seal. The power of heaven and earth immediately began to change, and it flowed into his body. Humph! Seeing this scene, Wu Mang laughed contemptuously. "You want to borrow the power of heaven and earth? With your level 3 giant spirit warrior strength, even if you can gather the spiritual energy of heaven and earth within a kilometer, you still won't be able to withstand my attack. A small loach will always be a small loach. No matter how big the waves you create, you can't become a dragon." "Then let's give it a try." Nie Tian was fearless. In midair, his long hair fluttered, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth surged in his Dantian's Yuan meridian, the domain origin formation rolled, and the power of the stars was ready to be unleashed. Facing a spirit wheel realm warrior, he could only fight with his life on the line. Apart from that, there was no other way. Actually, he still had a few tokens with him, but with Diao Zhengde and Wu Mang's shamelessness, even if he took them out, it would be useless. Diao Zhengde was the red shirt elder of the Alchemists' Guild. If he casually charged Nie Tian with insulting and beating him, even if he was a rank 4 alchemist, He couldn't do anything about it. Die. At this moment, Wu Mang suddenly raised his palm, and a vigorous palm suddenly struck out. Boom! Suddenly, a majestic, overbearing, and mighty palm force blasted out, like a giant prehistoric beast, surging with the most decisive murderous intent towards Nie Tian. At this moment, everyone could feel the strong wind blowing against their faces. It was like a razor blade, and it could almost cut their faces open. Nie Tian was in the center of the frenzy, but his entire person was like a fearless god of death. Flowing Killing Seal, open! Annihilation Earth Seal, open! Soul Annihilation Heaven Seal, open! In the next moment, Nie Tian's calm voice sounded, like an unshakable pillar in the midst of a violent storm. Boom! 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 Instantly, 3 loud explosions took place, and 3 giant barriers appeared in front of Nie Tian. The first was an illusionary palm, Flowing Killing Seal. The second was an earthen barrier, Annihilation Earth Seal. The third was a golden pillar, Soul Annihilation Heaven Seal. The 3 seals of the divine god of war corresponded to heaven, earth, and man. Every time they appeared, they could take on different shapes, and they could be used for both offense and defense. Against a divine wheel realm expert, Nie Tian's 3 seals of the divine god of war could only be used for defense. It wasn't because the 3 seals of the divine god of war were too weak, but because Nie Tian's own strength was too weak. If his strength could reach the true element realm, he could easily fight against Wu Mang with the 3 seals of the divine god of war. However, it was still unknown if the 3 seals of the divine god of war could defend against Wu Mang's attack. Everyone was stunned when they saw the aura that erupted from Nie Tian. Who would have thought that a giant spirit realm expert would be able to unleash such a powerful martial skill? It was simply unimaginable. Is this the power you borrowed from the force of the heaven and earth? Wu Mang sneered and roared, can't even withstand a single blow. The power of a divine wheel realm expert is not something you can imagine. Following the roar, the most intense collision and destruction took place. Boom! 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 Wu Mang's enormous palm force directly penetrated the 3 barriers. Chapter 443. However, Nie Tian remained fearless in the face of the powerful palm strike. In the next moment, his voice rang out again. 17th Blade, Sword Shadow Shield, activate. Extreme Wood Blue Sky Armor, activate. Astral Shield, activate. As soon as the unyielding voice fell, 3 layers of shields appeared on Nie Tian's body. One layer was formed by sword energy, the second layer was formed by azure armor, and the innermost layer was an invisible astral shield formed by 56 million stars. Everyone was dumbfounded. They could not imagine that Nie Tian had so many life-saving methods. In particular, the innermost layer of the astral shield emitted the purest power. Wu Mang could not help but frown. Bang! 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 The majestic palm force broke through the sword shadow shield and the extreme wood jade sky armor in succession. However, the remaining palm force bombarded the starlight shield with a dull sound. It actually couldn't break through the starlight shield. Nie Tian's figure was hit by the huge force and was directly sent flying. He was like a meteor in midair, streaking across the sky. He was actually knocked back thousands of meters. Brat, let's see if you can survive this. Ah! Nie Tian spat out a mouthful of blood in the air. Wu Mang could not help but laugh wildly when he saw this. Unless a Divine Wheel Realm expert could use the Divine Wheel space to defend against that punch, even the chi of a warrior in the 9th tier of Enlightenment Realm would not be able to defend against it. Nie Tian was only a warrior in the Giant Soul Realm. Even if he borrowed the power of heaven and earth, the power that he could exert was limited. Therefore, Wu Mang predicted that he would die. Reckless brat, how dare you resist the attack of a warrior in the Divine Wheel Realm? Even if you have 10,000 layers of defense, you will not be able to withstand a single blow. Diao Zhengda's face revealed a sinister look. The rest of the people were all shocked. The strength that Nie Tian displayed was too terrifying. Even if he could not defend against Wu Mang's attack, it was still beyond everyone's expectations. At this moment, it was especially so for Qiu Xiaofeng and the others. They didn't dare underestimate Nie Tian any longer, and they weren't able to arouse the slightest desire to compete for supremacy in their hearts any longer. If Wu Mang's palm strike landed on his body just now, just that kind of powerful aura was enough to make him unable to produce the slightest bit of resistance. Nie Tian's heaven-defying means were indeed unfathomable. At this moment, if the attacker was not a spirit wheel realm warrior, he would definitely be able to defend himself. Teacher. Duanmu Lu looked at the arc in the sky, his expression extremely sorrowful. Gu Wuyo and Guden's faces were filled with shock and grimness. They felt a suppressive power within their bodies that was about to explode out. Everyone looked at the figure in the sky. There was dead silence as they waited for the figure to descend from the sky. The figure in the sky became smaller and smaller, slowly disappearing from the crowd's sight. Although Nie Tian had been defeated, his all-powerful means had been deeply imprinted in the minds and souls of everyone present. If such a character grew to the spirit wheel realm, he would definitely be the supreme expert that looked down on the entire 3,000 small world. However, at this moment, the figure that was thousands of meters away suddenly moved. Who? Two ear-piercing sounds could be heard. A pair of sword shadow wings that were more than 10 meters long actually appeared behind Nie Tian's back. It was the proud sword heaven wings. Who? The proud sword heaven wings suddenly shook, and Nie Tian's figure rushed over. In the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in front of everyone. At this moment, Nie Tian's entire body was dripping with fresh blood. His body was a mess of flesh and blood, and it was almost impossible to tell that he was human. However, he was still alive, and his aura was still very strong. There were no signs of dying at all. You! Wu Mang looked at the unyielding figure that suddenly appeared beside him. His eyes suddenly widened, but he couldn't shout out the following words. Everyone else was also stunned. The scene became dead silent, and the entire world was quiet. Everyone's gaze was focused on the youth, whose face couldn't be distinguished. Their eyes were filled with astonishment, shock, doubt, fear, and countless other emotions that were extremely complicated. The commander of the Dan Wu Hall only has this little strength? Nie Tian's pair of bloodshot eyes stared at Wu Mang. His voice sounded out cold and disdainful. A palm strike with all my strength can't even kill a giant spirit realm martial artist? Every word and every note of the ice-cold words were like the loudest slap on Wu Mang's face, slapping him until his entire body was in a daze. Hiss! Only at this moment did everyone react and gasp. Everything was too bizarre. A giant spirit realm martial artist actually took a blow from a divine wheel realm martial artist head-on and actually didn't die. Such a matter, if they didn't see it with their own eyes, they absolutely wouldn't believe it. Everyone's eyeballs almost popped out, and the gaze they looked at Nie Tian was filled with dense fear. Especially Mo Feng, the deep shock in his heart was almost branded into his soul. At this moment, he knew that even if the current Nie Tian fought with Mou, the outcome of the battle wasn't certain. Nie Tian's strength was too terrifying, and it exceeded everyone's imagination. This kind of person could only be described with one word, and that was shocking. Teacher! Duanmu Lu's tensed body finally couldn't hold on any longer. He wailed and collapsed to the ground. Fortunately, Gu Wuyo was there to support him. Bang! Nie Tian's entire body shook, and more than half of the bloodstains on his body disappeared. His face became clear, and a pair of eyes stared at Wu Mang and Diao Jingde, who were already shocked to the point of numbness. The ridicule and contempt in his eyes were so intense. Impossible! Diao Jingde finally reacted. His entire body trembled, and his roar sounded like a boar that was about to be castrated. With Diao Jingde's knowledge of the martial Dao, he simply couldn't imagine how Nie Tian survived. Son of AB** Tsich. Finally, Wu Mang also reacted. His gloomy face was almost dripping blood. He clenched his fists, and the rage in his body nearly condensed into a substance. His entire body was trembling, and he bellowed in a deep voice, "Since you're courting death, this commander will send you another palm strike." One palm strike couldn't even kill a giant spirit realm martial artist. Once today's matter was spread out, Wu Mang would become the joke of the Danwu Hall and even the entire 3,000 lesser worlds. Even the Alchemist Guild's face would lose all light. And if they let Nye Tian leave alive today, then Wu Mang's face would be thrown into a cesspool. It would absolutely be so smelly that one couldn't bear to look at it. Therefore, no matter what, they must not let Nye Tian leave here alive today. At this moment, Mo Feng and Qiu Wuheng, who were watching coldly from the side, actually looked at each other as if they had a tacit understanding. At this moment, they also had the heart to kill Nye Tian. Nye Tian's talent and strength were too monstrous. The Meru Spirit Capital's 3 monstrous geniuses weren't even considered dregs in front of him. If a character like Nye Tian was allowed to continue growing, there would be a day when the 4 great clans would definitely be trampled under his feet. They wouldn't even have the qualifications to look up to them. To people like them, who thought highly of themselves, this was simply a disaster. Therefore, for the current Nye Tian, even if Wu Mang didn't make a move, Mo Feng and Qiu Wuheng would make a move. Anyone could see that Nye Tian was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Forget about Wu Mang, any random martial artist present could easily instantly kill Nye Tian. Chapter 444. When Wu Mang's roar ended, everyone present was stunned. A dignified Dan Martial Hall commander couldn't kill a giant spirit realm martial artist with a single palm strike, and he actually wanted to add another palm strike. This was too shameless. The Dan Martial Hall was a martial arts organization of the Alchemist Association. If news of this got out, wouldn't people laugh their heads off? However, Nye Tian was surprisingly calm at this moment. He took a step forward, and 3 tokens appeared in his palm. The Alchemist Association's Red Cloth token, the Tang Clan's Inner Court token, and the Alchemist Association's Tier 4 Alchemist badge. When the 3 tokens appeared, everyone present was stunned again. Under normal circumstances, any one of these 3 tokens could save Nye Tian's life. Nye Tian took them out right now, wanting to make a final effort. However, with Jiao Jingde and Wu Mang's shamelessness, even if these 3 tokens were added together, it probably wouldn't be of much use. When Jiao Jingde and Wu Mang saw the 3 tokens in Nye Tian's hand, they were stunned at first, and their faces had a brief moment of surprise. "Stinking brat, where did you steal these tokens from?" As expected, Jiao Jingde smiled coldly and directly slandered Nye Tian's tokens as stolen. Nye Tian smiled bitterly. He had long expected this result. However, Wu Mang had a trace of hesitation at this moment, and his gaze couldn't help but look at Jiao Jingde. The 3 tokens in Nye Tian's hand, any one of them represented an extraordinary meaning. Even if these tokens were really stolen by Nye Tian, before there was proof, he had to treat it as the truth first. Jiao Jingde smiled coldly and said, "This master is the Alchemist Association's red-clothed elder. I've never heard of a Tier 4 alchemist like you in the Alchemist Association. As for the Tang Clan token in your hand, that's an inner court token that only the Tang Clan's inner court elders can possess. This master doesn't believe you can obtain it." Master Jiao is right. As soon as Jiao Jingde's voice sounded, Mo Feng stood up and glanced at Nye Tian with a murderous gaze. He said coldly, "The Tang Clan only has 4 inner court elders, and I know every one of them. The token in his hand is the Tang Clan's inner court token, and only inner court elders can possess it. Even the Tang Clan's lineal descendants can only have an outer court token. So, the token in his hand must be fake." Mo Feng was even more ruthless than Jiao Jingde. He directly said that Nye Tian's identity medallion was fake. After he finished speaking, He looked at Chiu Wuheng and said meaningfully, "Brother Chiu, this old man is right, right?" Obviously, Mo Feng wanted to pull Chiu Wuheng in. If the token in Nye Tian's hand was real, then the Alchemist Guild, Mo clan, and Chiu clan would have to bear the Tang clan's wrath together. At that time, even if someone in the Tang family was unhappy, they wouldn't have to fall out with all three families. Of course, Chiu Wuheng understood Mo Feng's meaning. With a sinister smile, he said, "Elder Mo Feng is right. The Tang family's inner court token is only given to the inner court elders. How could it be given to an outsider? The token in this kid's hand is definitely fake." Seventh uncle, his token was given by Tang 13. Suddenly, Chiu Shaokong walked over and whispered to Chiu Wuheng, but he was interrupted by a fierce look from the latter. Chiu Shaokong was at the Dragon Blood martial meet that day, and he saw with his own eyes that Tang 13 was the one who gave the intersect medallion to Nye Tian, and a few of the Tang family hidden guards were against it. Tang 13 was Tang Hao's favorite grandson. Other direct descendants could only get an outer sect token, but it was not strange for Tang 13 to get an inner sect token. Chiu Shaokong swallowed his words halfway. He immediately understood that at this moment, regardless of whether the token in Nye Tian's hand was real or fake, he had to treat it as fake, because the three major powers here would not allow Nye Tian to live. Nye Tian couldn't help but smile bitterly as he looked at these self-proclaimed big shots spouting nonsense. It turned out that in this world, powerful people could be so bold and confident even when they were shameless. He already knew that it was useless to take out all three tokens, but the reason why he did so was to stall for time. If the Tang family, the Battle Cloud sect, or the Qiankuan Palace arrived, he would have a chance to live. Unfortunately, none of these powers had arrived. Logically speaking, the Tang family should have arrived by now. They were all from the four major aristocratic families, but how could their efficiency be slower than others? If the Tang family's people arrived, no matter who they were, as long as they saw the intersect token, they would absolutely not let anyone else touch Nye Tian. "Stinking brat, you have nothing to say, right?" Diao Jingde saw that Nye Tian didn't say anything, and couldn't help but smile coldly. He hurriedly signaled Wu Mang to start. The longer they delayed, the more dreams there would be. If the Tang family's people really arrived, it would be impossible to kill Nye Tian anymore. "Humph!" Nye Tian smiled in disdain and said, "I indeed have nothing to say, but I have nothing to say because of your shamelessness. You have simply refreshed my understanding of shamelessness." Still trying to be eloquent even at death's door, Diao Jingde smiled faintly and said to Wu Mang, "Commander Wu, do it." But at this moment, Wu Mang was a little hesitant. He wasn't afraid of the token in Nye Tian's hand, but he was afraid of that rank 4 alchemist badge. If Nye Tian was really a rank 4 alchemist, then the crime of killing an alchemist was not small. Even if he was from the Dan Wu Hall, Meng Fanchen wouldn't let him off easily. Moreover, Nye Tian was so young. If he was really a rank 4 alchemist, his talent was even more terrifying than Gu Qiulong, one of the 3 monstrous geniuses of Su Mi Ling City. Meng Fanchen loved talent the most, especially young monstrous alchemist geniuses. Wu Mang had heard that the relationship between Nye Tian and the other red-clothed elder, Gu Yi, was pretty good, to the extent that they even addressed each other as brothers. Perhaps the red-clothed token and 4th-tier alchemist badge in his possession were all real. "Fifth Commander, if you aren't afraid of incurring the wrath of the Alchemist Association and Tang family, then feel free to come and kill me." Nye Tian shouted with more confidence when he saw Wu Mang hesitating. At a time like this, every second he could drag was every second. "Commander Wu, quickly kill him. I will talk to President Meng, you don't have to worry." Diao Jingde saw Wu Mang hesitating and transmitted his voice anxiously. "This master will bear all the consequences. As long as you kill him, I promise to refine 100 rank 6 spirit pills for you." In order to kill Nye Tian, Diao was simply crazy and gave Wu Mang a huge promise. 100 rank 6 spirit pills required Diao to refine for half a year without rest. Okay. Under the temptation of huge profits, Wu Mang hardened his heart and roared angrily, "Stinking brat, impersonating a rank 4 alchemist and forging the Tang family's inner sect token. Today, this commander will execute you on the spot." Killing, and he even had to kill in a dignified and righteous manner. Diao Zhengde and Wu Mang's shamelessness had truly reached the boundary. Wu Mang no longer hesitated. The aura of his entire body gushed out. A ball of essence energy in his palm almost condensed into a substance. A shocking palm smacked out forcefully. This time, Wu Mang used even the essence energy that sucked milk. If he still couldn't kill Nietian, he would really have to find a piece of tofu and smash his head to death. Chapter 445. Everyone felt the aura emanating from Wu Mang's body and retreated with horror. Everyone held their breath at this moment, their hearts were in their throats, and their eyes were wide open. They did not want to miss a single moment. The terrifying pressure displayed under Wu Mang's palm made everyone feel like their chests were oppressed to the point of discomfort. At this moment, everyone was sure that Nietian could only wait for death, and not even his corpse would be left. However, Nietian did not wait for death. His eyes were cold and firm, and there was not the slightest hint of fear in his eyes. Even the heaven-slash sword appeared in his hand. Oh my God! What is he going to do? Is he going to resist? Great shock and astonishment surged in everyone's hearts. Who would have thought that even under such circumstances, with such a great disparity in strength and with serious injuries, Nietian was still unyielding and wanted to resist to the end. Resist. Of course, Nietian wanted to resist. Not to mention that the person standing in front of him was just a spirit wheel warrior, even if it was a peak heaven emperor warrior, he would still resist to the end. On the path of martial arts, one must have a firm mind. No matter how powerful and terrifying the enemy was, one must be unyielding and fight to the end. Poof, poof, poof. Just when everyone was in disbelief, countless sword auras suddenly erupted from Nietian's body and directly pierced through his body. Suddenly, his body was like a sieve and blood spurted out wildly. Use my blood to stimulate my sword intent, prove my swordsmanship, unyielding proud sword. AO Sword Technique, Taboo Move. Heaven Extinguishing 3 Swords First Form, Weeping Blood Soul. An unyielding voice sounded. Nietian stood proudly like a demon that looked down on the world and despised everything. At this moment, he actually burned his own blood to stimulate the uncondensed sword intent to release the taboo move of AO Sword Technique. Heaven Extinguishing 3 Swords First Form, Weeping Blood Soul. This was a taboo move that Nietian did not dare to use when he was at the peak Heaven Emperor realm in his previous life. At this moment, he was already seriously injured, and he had no choice but to use the taboo move. He did not know what would happen to him if the Weeping Blood Soul fell, and whether he could survive was unknown. Blood chi and sword intent surged, and an endless bloody intent of slaughter appeared in the air. The sword intent enveloped the entire space, and it was suffused with a boundless murderous aura. At this moment, no one knew how to describe the shock in their hearts. The strength that Nietian had displayed had far exceeded their understanding of a giant spirit realm martial practitioner. Nietian knew that even if he didn't die after using this forbidden move, his Yuan Spirit Yuan Meridian would inevitably suffer irreparable damage. Moreover, he didn't know if the current Heaven Extinguishing 1 sword, Weeping Blood Severing Soul, could block Wu Mang's palm. The taboo move was indeed heaven-defying, but unfortunately, Nietian's strength was too weak. Just as Nietian was about to release his taboo move, a powerful aura suddenly appeared in his spiritual consciousness and rushed towards him. He's finally here. At this moment, Nietian was so happy that he was about to cry. He immediately retracted his aura. He was not willing to use a forbidden technique unless he was facing certain death. When everyone saw Nyetian suddenly retract his aura, they all frowned. Was he waiting for death? At the same time, a figure whistled over from 1,000 meters away. The speed was so fast that it could almost penetrate the air barrier. Boom! In the next moment, a streak of violent blade chi appeared out of nowhere and formed a shield around Nyetian's body made of blade intent. Bang! In the blink of an eye, the force of Wu Mang's palm hit the saber intent shield. However, there was only a muffled sound, and then there was no reaction at all. It was hard to imagine that a thin layer of saber intent shield could easily block Wu Mang's all-out palm. Everyone was stunned by the sudden scene. But there were two people who immediately reacted. Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan looked at each other and nodded. They actually attacked at the same time, blasting towards Nyetian. These two people didn't care who the person who suddenly appeared was. They had already made up their mind to kill Nyetian. Boom! Boom! Both of them were Spirit Wheel Realm warriors. The power that suddenly erupted was very shocking. Suddenly, two huge waves of air whizzed out, like a dragon from the bottom of the sea, blasting towards Nyetian. The saber intent shield could block Wu Mang's attack. But could it block the joint attack of two Spirit Wheel Realm warriors? Who dares to touch him? At this moment, an angry roar sounded in midair. Immediately, a saber chi that was as majestic as a mountain rushed out. Boom! The saber chi spread out for 1,000 meters, like a heavenly pillar. It turned into a saber shadow and blocked in front of Nyetian, just in time to help him block Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan's attack. The saber chi swept past, and on the ground, a huge deep pit appeared. At a glance, it was so deep that the bottom could not be seen. Bang! The next moment, a figure fell from the sky like a boulder falling to the ground, directly setting off a sky full of dust. Everyone was stunned for a long time, not knowing what happened. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. First, Wu Mang's attack was blocked. Then, Mo Feng and Qiu Wuhan's inexplicable attacks were also blocked. The strength of the person who blocked the attack of 3 Spirit Wheel Realm warriors was so terrifying that it made people's hair stand on end. Who is it? Wu Mang, Mo Feng, and Qiu Wuhan shouted angrily at the same time. Seeing that they were about to kill Nyetian, but at this moment, there was someone who blocked them. How could they not be angry? Dust filled the sky, and what appeared in front of everyone was actually a tall and sturdy martial artist with iron chains wrapped around his body. The iron chains had actually pierced through his shoulder blades, causing his entire body to emit an even more tyrannical and ruthless aura. Elder Yi. Seeing the figure in front of him clearly, Nyetian's tense nerves immediately relaxed. His face was extremely pale, but it also eased. At the critical moment, the person who killed in time was not someone from the Tang family, the Battle Cloud sect, or Qiankuan Palace, but the person Nyetian met in the Great Chu Heavenly Prison by chance, Frenzied Blade Yi Linyun. Mr. Nye, are you okay? Elder Yi didn't care about Wu Mang and the others at all. Seeing that Nyetian's body was covered in blood and there were actually wounds on his body, his face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He hurriedly stepped forward and injected a strong energy into Nyetian's body. I won't die yet. After receiving the energy supply from Frenzied Blade, Nyetian's complexion immediately improved. With a bitter smile, he nodded and said, Fortunately, Elder Yi came in time. If you were half an hour late, I'm afraid I would be a corpse. Elder Yi nodded solemnly, indicating that he would take care of the rest. As he took a step forward, Elder Ye's piercingly cold and murderous gaze locked onto Wu Mang, Mo Feng, and Qiu Wuhan. When the latter three noticed the overbearing killing intent in Elder Ye's gaze, their hearts trembled at the same time while their bodies trembled. This feeling was like a little lamb that was targeted by a ferocious wolf, and it was actually a feeling of despair that was powerless to resist. The three of them looked at each other. They didn't expect that the strength of the person who came would be so strong that he could completely suppress them. At the moment, Elder Ye's strength was at the 3rd tier of the spirit wheel, while Wu Mang and the other two were only at the first tier of the spirit wheel. The spirit wheel realm, each tier was like the world. Even if Elder Ye's strength was suppressed by the demon sealing curse, Wu Mang and the other two were definitely no match for him even if they worked together. Chapter 446. Wu Mang, Mo Feng, and Qiu Wuhan looked at Elder Yi with deep fear in their eyes. Especially the two iron chains on Elder Ye's back. They seemed to be some kind of terrifying curse that was suppressing his strength. It was hard to imagine that this person in front of them still had such strength under the suppression of the curse. If the curse was removed, how terrifying would it be? The three of them estimated that Elder Ye's strength was definitely comparable to the inner sect elders of the four major clans or the deputy hall masters of the Elixir Martial Hall. The inner sect elders of the four major clans and the deputy hall masters of the Elixir Martial Hall were all above the fifth tier of the Divine Wheel. They were all the top figures in the 3,000 small worlds. This person in front of them was very unfamiliar. Where did he come from? They guessed correctly. Elder Yi already had the strength of the sixth tier of the Divine Wheel 40 years ago. Unfortunately, he was hit by the demon sealing curse, and his strength dropped to the second tier of the Divine Wheel. Just yesterday, Elder Ye's strength increased by another tier, reaching the third tier of the Divine Wheel. However, he knew that it wouldn't take long for his strength to return to the third tier of the Divine Wheel. Even though his body was suppressed by the demon sealing curse, Elder Yi still didn't stop cultivating in the past 40 years. Previously, he had an increase in strength, but it was quickly suppressed by the demon sealing curse. In the past 40 years, he lived through this kind of fluctuation in strength. This kind of pain couldn't be understood unless one experienced it personally. To be able to withstand the suppression of the demon sealing curse for 40 years, Yi Linyun's martial will was really strong. And his martial will was perfectly inherited by Qiu Shan. Qiu Shan's vital meridians were destroyed for 25 years, but he still persisted in cultivating. This kind of will wasn't much weaker than his grandfather, Yi Linyun. The path of martial arts was like rowing a boat against the current and climbing the ladder to heaven. Those who could stand at the peak not only had great talent, but also unparalleled perseverance. Elder Yi was hit by the demon sealing curse 40 years ago. If it wasn't for that, his current strength would definitely be at the peak of the 9th tier of the Divine Wheel or even the Heaven Evolution realm. Whether it was the peak of the 9th tier of the Divine Wheel or the Heaven Evolution realm, they were definitely the peak strength in the 3,000 small worlds. Sir, I am Elder Mo of the Mo clan. Mo Feng saw Elder Ye's face full of anger and fear. He tried to speak, but he was interrupted by Elder Yi before he could finish his sentence. Scram! Elder Yi snorted coldly. He glared at Mo Feng and roared, I don't care who you are. If you dare to take another step forward, you will die. Mo Feng had just opened his mouth when he was directly interrupted by the other party. Moreover, he was even reprimanded. Instantly, his expression turned ugly. However, Elder Ye's strength was too terrifying. Even if he was indignant, he didn't dare to show it. He probed again, This old man admires you. Your strength is outstanding and you are one of the strongest in the world. But do you know that I'm not a humph? Once again, Elder Yi sneered. His cold gaze swept across Mo Feng and he said arrogantly, a mere outer court elder of the Mo clan. Even if Mo Zhaojing were here, I wouldn't be afraid. As soon as Elder Ye's words fell, the onlookers gasped. Mo Zhaojing was the name of the head of the Mo family. Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing were the two men who stood at the peak of the 3,000 lesser world. This person didn't even take Mo Zhaojing seriously. Wasn't he too arrogant? Mo Feng's old face was extremely embarrassed. He had never thought that the person in front of him wasn't even afraid of the head of the Mo family. Why would he care about him, an outer court elder of the Mo family? Wu Mang and Qiu Wuhan looked at each other. Their expressions were also extremely embarrassed. At this moment, a slightly mocking voice rang out. It was Diao Jingde. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Elder Yi. He actually laughed disdainfully and said, "You are only a martial artist in the third tier of the spirit wheel. This strength is indeed very strong, but it's a pity that it's not enough for you to look down on the head of the Mo family." Wu Mang and the other two couldn't sense Elder Ye's strength, but Diao Jingde, a sixth-tier alchemist, had strong mental strength. He could see through Elder Ye's strength at a glance. Diao Jingde was very cunning. He directly pointed out Elder Ye's strength for Wu Mang and the other two to hear, so that they wouldn't have any misgivings. If Wu Mang and the others didn't know Elder Ye's true strength, they would definitely be afraid. Now that they knew that Elder Yi only had the strength of the third tier of the spirit wheel, their expressions were much calmer. Humph! Sure enough, as soon as Diao Jingde's voice fell, Qiu Wuhan stepped forward and said with a cold smile, "I thought you were some earth-shattering big shot. Turns out that you are just a martial artist in the third tier of the spirit wheel. Do you really think that you are invincible in the world? How dare you look down on the head of the Mo family?" Elder Yi frowned slightly. He suddenly stepped out with one foot, and immediately a gust of saber chi whizzed out. "Me!" Qiu Wuhan shouted. He didn't expect Elder Yi to suddenly attack. He immediately opened the space of the spirit wheel to defend himself. Bang! With a muffled sound, the saber chi was abnormally fast and violent. It directly bombarded Qiu Wuhan and sent him flying backward. Puff! Qiu Wuhan's feet drew 2 scratches on the ground that were more than 10 meters long. After he stood up, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Qiu Wuhan clenched his fists tightly. He was furious. Even the mustache at the corner of his mouth twitched. He stared cold at Elder Yi and roared in a hoarse voice, "Old dog, how dare you hurt me? Do you know who I am? I'm from the Qiu family." Slap! However, before he could finish his words, what responded to him was a palm condensed by the saber intent, slapping his face. The crisp and harsh sound of the slap fell. Qiu Wuhan widened his small eyes and looked at Elder Yi in disbelief. He was completely dumbfounded. He never thought that someone would dare to slap him, an outer elder of the Qiu family, in public. This was not only a personal humiliation for him, but also a humiliation for the entire Qiu family. The Qiu family was one of the 4 great families, one of the forces that couldn't be provoked the most in the 3,000 small worlds. Who was this person? How dare he ignore the dignity of the 4 great families? "How dare you scold me?" Elder Yi sneered and said coldly, "Even your family head, Qiu Shinfeng, was defeated by me. Who do you think you are? How dare you use the Qiu family's name to suppress me? Can you suppress me?" His bold and fearless voice was like a clap of thunder that resounded in everyone's ears and hearts. It was a domineering aura. Qiu Shinfeng was the name of the family head of the Qiu family. Elder Yi opened his mouth twice and directly despised the 2 family heads of the 4 great families. The madness of the wild blade was peerlessly domineering. Nie Tian smiled bitterly and said in his heart, "Wild blade Yi Linyun is indeed worthy of being the madman who challenged all the geniuses of Xumi Lingdu 80 years ago." Just one word, domineering. Qiu Wuhan completely became a withered eggplant this time. He looked at Elder Yi with fear from the bottom of his heart and didn't dare to make a sound. Elder Yi was too domineering. He didn't give anyone any leeway at all. He didn't put the Mo family and the Qiu family in his eyes at all. Chapter 447. What do you want to do? Sensing the anger and contempt in Elder Ye's eyes, Wu Mang's forehead was dripping with sweat. His face was pale, and even his voice was trembling slightly. Who would have thought that the dignified Dan Marshall Hall commander would be frightened by a single look? This was the prestige of an expert. Every action could make people who thought they were powerful tremble in fear. Everyone felt the piercing aura from Elder Yi and retreated while discussing in low voices. Who is this person? How can he be so powerful? He's simply too arrogant. He doesn't even respect the Mo and Chiu clan's clan head. He actually said that the Chiu clan's clan head was defeated by him. I wonder if it's true? Looking at his aura, it shouldn't be fake. Such a big shot wouldn't lie. Elder Yi ignored the discussions of the crowd. He took a step forward, and his aura suddenly erupted, forcing Wu Mang to retreat continuously. Wu Mang staggered and almost fell down. I dare to guarantee that if you touch me, the Dan Marshall Hall definitely won't let you off. Wu Mang was completely in a mess, and his voice began to tremble. Humph. Elder Yi smiled coldly, and the mockery on his face intensified. He then laughed loudly and said, "Someone like you is worthy of being the Dan Marshall Hall commander? Meng Fanchen and Zhang Tingyin are really blind." Meng Fanchen, president of the Alchemist Association. Zhang Tingyin, hall master of the Dan Marshall Hall. These two represented the highest prestige of the Alchemist Association. However, from Elder Ye's words, he obviously didn't think much of these two. At most, he treated them as people who were on par with him. Audacious. At this moment, Diao Jingde spoke again without any fear. His expression was slightly cold. You actually called President Meng and Hall Master Zhang by their names. Do you know that this is challenging the prestige of the Alchemist Association and the Dan Marshall Hall? Elder Yi suddenly turned around, and his cold eyes locked onto Diao Jingde. He took a step forward, and his surging aura pressured the latter. He said coldly, "Are the Alchemist Association and Dan Marshall Hall very scary? Can't I challenge them? For people like you to be able to become red-cloved elders and Dan Marshall Hall commanders, this is the biggest joke. The reputation of the Alchemist Guild and the Dan Marshall Hall is ruined in the hands of people like you." Under the pressure of Elder Ye's aura, Diao Jingde's face immediately turned red. He felt an invisible hand tightly choking his neck, making it hard for him to breathe. You dare to kill me? Diao Jingde used all his strength and squeezed the words out of his mouth. "You're a red-robed elder of the Alchemist Association. I don't dare to kill you, but I dare to teach you a lesson on behalf of Meng Fanchen." Elder Ye's face was filled with malice. Then, a loud slap was heard. Pa, pa, pa. 3 crisp and ear-piercing sounds rang out. Diao Jingde felt that the invisible hand on his neck had disappeared, but one side of his face was burning with pain. The 3 slaps were all on one side of his face, leaving a clear and glaring blood-red handprint on his face. Shame. It was a great humiliation. Diao Jingde simply didn't dare to believe that someone actually dared to slap the red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Association in front of everyone. Everyone's gaze landed on Diao Jingde's face. The clear, blood-red handprint was glaring. No one would have thought that Elder Yi would actually humiliate Diao Jingde in such a way. The latter was a red-clothed elder of the Alchemist Association. Even the clan heads of the 4 great clans might not dare to do so. Unfortunately, Elder Yi did it without hesitation. These 3 slaps weren't only on Diao Jingde's face, but also on the Alchemist Association's face. Diao Jingde was stunned for a few seconds. When he reacted, his face became furious, trembling, and malevolent. When Mo Feng and Chiu Wuhan saw this scene, there was no anger on their faces. Instead, there was a hint of mockery and complacency. They didn't think that Elder Yi would actually slap Diao Jingde. Doing so would undoubtedly completely offend the Alchemist Association. At this moment, Chiu Wuhan felt that the slap he gave earlier was still considered light. At the very least, he was much luckier than Diao Jingde. However, Elder Yi didn't have the slightest abnormal reaction. He only swept a glance at Diao Jingde and said in a cold tone, "Don't think of taking revenge on me. Even if Meng Fanchen and Zhang Tingyin were here, they wouldn't dare to say anything. If it wasn't for them, I would have killed you right now." Elder Ye's tone was stern, revealing the arrogance in his bones. He didn't put the Alchemist Association in his eyes at all. The reason why he didn't kill Diao Jingde was because of Meng Fanchen and Zhang Tingyin. Mr. Nye, I can't kill this person. Please don't mind him. With Elder Ye's intelligence, he could already see that among everyone here, the one who wanted to kill Nye Tian the most was Diao Jingde. However, he couldn't directly kill him on behalf of Nye Tian. After all, Diao Jingde was a red-robed elder. If he killed him, he wouldn't be able to explain it to Meng Fanchen. When everyone saw that Elder Ye's attitude towards Nye Tian was so calm and even respectful, they couldn't help but be stunned. One after another, they started to guess the relationship between Nye Tian and Elder Yi. Nye Tian didn't care about it. His gaze swept across Diao Jingde and the others. Without concealing his killing intent, he said indifferently, "Elder Yi, you don't have to take it to heart. I've remembered these people. There's no need to trouble Elder Yi with their lives. Some things must be done by oneself, and some people must be killed by oneself." Nye Tian wouldn't let Diao Jingde and the others go. Today's matter, he would definitely remember it. Even if Elder Yi really wanted to kill them, Nye Tian would still stop him. On one hand, he didn't want Elder Yi to offend a powerful enemy because of him. On the other hand, he would personally take their lives. "Good," Elder Yi laughed and said, "take revenge on your own. Mr. Nye is indeed a real man. This Yi admires your pride. Elder Yi, let's leave this place first." Nye Tian was afraid that some big shots would come later. If the inner elders of the 4 great clans came, it would be troublesome. With Elder Ye's current strength, it was too much for him to fight against the inner elders of the 4 great clans. "Don't worry. Although I can't kill them, I will make them pay." Elder Yi smiled indifferently. He turned around and looked at the 4-winged griffin not far away. 2 rays of light shot out from his eyes. The 4-winged griffin in the distance suddenly went berserk. It raised its head and let out a roar. The cultivators who were still sitting on the griffin felt that something was wrong and jumped down. Roar! The 4-winged griffin let out a strange cry. Its huge wings flapped a few times. Then, it shook its head at Elder Yi, showing its obedience. "Beast tamer." Seeing this scene, Nye Tian exclaimed in his heart. He didn't expect that Elder Yi was actually an extremely rare beast tamer. Taming the rank 5 4-winged griffin in the blink of an eye, Elder Yi was at least a rank 6 beast tamer. Nye Tian saw it clearly. Elder Yi first used saber energy to break the soul imprint on the 4-winged griffin. Then, he instantly carved his own soul imprint on it. His method was strange and unimaginable. Then, Elder Yi did the same and tamed the other 2 4-winged griffins in the distance. Chapter 448. After taming the 3 4-winged griffins, Elder Yi did not stay any longer. He leaped up and used saber chi to wrap Nye Tian, Duanmulu, Gu Wuyo, and Guden before landing on a 4-winged griffin. Under everyone's dumbfounded gaze, the 3 4-winged griffins soared into the sky and let out a cry. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. On the ground, the dust raised by the 4-winged griffins gradually settled. Diao Jingde, Wu Mang, Mo Feng, Qiu Wuheng, and the others stared blankly in the direction the 4-winged griffins disappeared, unable to react for a long time. Only when the 3 4-winged griffins completely disappeared did they react. Qiu Wuheng was the first to react. Suddenly, he thought of something and his expression changed. He said in horror, "That person just now seemed to call himself the Frenzied Saber." Frenzied Saber? Hearing this name, Mo Feng's expression stiffened. He said in shock, "Could it be the world-defying berserk saber Yi Linyun who challenged all the geniuses of Xumi Lingdu 80 years ago?" Yi Linyun. Diao Jingde and Wu Meng were stunned at the same time. Clearly, they were not unfamiliar with this name. Frenzied Saber Yi Linyun. This name might be very unfamiliar to the younger generation, but to cultivators over 100 years old, it was a well-known name. 80 years ago, a heaven-defying saber user appeared in the 3000 small world. He once stepped into Xumi Lingdu and challenged all the geniuses. At that time, all the geniuses of Xumi Lingdu were defeated by this person. Even Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing, who were known as the two great geniuses of Shumilingdu, could only fight evenly with this saber user. In the end, this saber user was defeated by another person and disappeared without a trace. In the 3,000 small worlds, there was no trace of the frenzied saber. This saber user was known as the world-defying Berserk Saber. His real name was Yi Linyun. If he's Yi Linyun, then what he said about Patriarch Qiu being defeated by him isn't a lie. Mo Feng's expression was one of shock. Suppressing his surprise, he gulped and said, "If he's Yi Linyun, then what he said before about Patriarch Qiu being defeated by him isn't a lie." "Yes." Wu Meng nodded and said, "Not only that, even Palace Master Zhang lost to him. 80 years ago, other than Tang Hao and Mo Zhaojing, who could barely compete with Yi Linyun, all the other prodigies were defeated by him. The Qiu clan's patriarch, Qiu Shinfeng, and the Elixir Martial Hall's Hall Master, Zhang Tingyin, were all defeated by Yi Linyun. No wonder this person is so arrogant. It's actually the world-defying wild saber from 80 years ago." Qiu Wuheng touched his still hot face, and his expression became even more fearful. "I don't care who he is. Even if he really is a world-defying wild blade, humiliating a red-cloved elder of the Alchemist Guild will still result in his death." Diao Zhengde was actually the calmest among them. With a sinister expression, he said in his heart, "Yi Linyun, even if the Alchemist Guild doesn't kill you, the people from the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion will definitely kill you." Once again, Diao Zhengde wanted to invite the Ling Xian Heavenly Pavilion to kill Yi Linyun. With Yi Linyun's strength, they would have to hire at least a purple gold rank or even a diamond rank assassin from the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion to kill him. Could Diao Zhengde invite him? What relationship does he have with the Ling Xian Heaven Pavilion? After a long time, the crowd slowly dispersed. Not long after, there would be crazy news that the world-defying wild blade Yi Linyun, who suddenly disappeared 80 years ago, had once again appeared. And just when the crowd had all left, in a dark corner, two figures quietly appeared like lurking ghosts. These two figures were like ghosts. There was not the slightest aura of a martial artist on them. They did not even have the slightest aura of a living person. They were like two moving corpses. The metal chain on that person's body, is it the death god's metal chain? One of them opened his mouth. There was no emotion in his tone, and it was a very mechanical voice. "He is the person that the city lord is looking for." The other nodded. The two of them exchanged glances and immediately disappeared into the darkness. These two people were from Chaos City, and the city lord they were talking about was the city lord of Chaos City. However, Chaos City had always been managed by the Vice City Lord. The real City Lord had always been a mystery, and had never appeared before. A whoosh. Above their heads, the wind was fierce, whistling past. Nie Tian and the rest sat on the four-winged griffins. The wind was so strong that it could almost pierce through their eardrums. The other two four-winged griffins followed closely on both sides, as if they were escorting the group. "Mr. Nie, why don't you introduce your friends to me?" Although Elder Yi was very strong, under normal circumstances, he was very amiable and did not put on any airs. Duanmu Lu and the rest introduced themselves. "Senior's strength is really too strong. This junior admires you." Go Dan chuckled and said. Elder Yi did not have much of a reaction. He only nodded his head and smiled. There was a hint of bitterness in his smile. Elder Yi dealt with the Alchemist Guild, the Mo family and the Qiu family in a domineering manner. The aura and strength that he displayed made people deeply impressed. However, Nie Tian understood a principle, and that was not to be envious of the prestige of the strong. Behind the prestige, no one knew how much the strong had to pay for it. Since ancient times, those who were able to become unparalleled experts had put in the most arduous effort. They had the exploration of an eagle, the focus of a poisonous snake, the hard work of an ant, and the patience of a silkworm. After putting in so much effort, they could finally stand in front of the world as strong experts. Especially Elder Yi, He had put in more effort than ordinary people. However, what he received was far less than what he had put in. 40 years ago, he was already at the 6th tier of the divine wheel. Now, he was only at the 3rd tier of the divine wheel. Moreover, he had to endure the torture of the demon sealing curse at all times. This kind of pain was not something that ordinary people could imagine. Brother Godan, do you know who Elder Yi is? Nye Tian smiled faintly and asked with a strange expression. Godan and the rest shook their heads. They really did not know the identity of Elder Yi. However, Elder Ye's performance just now was too shocking and domineering. Elder Yi is the world-defying wild blade who single-handedly challenged the geniuses of Sumi Ling City 80 years ago. Nye Tian gave a simple explanation, and it was very vivid. Godan and the rest were stunned and said, Elder Yi, how did it feel to fight with Lord Tang Hao? Was it very satisfying? Tang Hao, Mo Zhaojing, and the rest were all legends of the 3,000 small worlds. It was too terrifying for Elder Yi to be able to fight with these people and not be defeated. Let's not talk about the past. Elder Yi shook his head slightly. His expression was somewhat solemn. He was not very interested in talking about the heroic history of the past. Nye Tian saw that Elder Yi did not look too good. He frowned and asked, Elder Yi, did you get those 2 medicinal ingredients? Elder Yi escaped from the Great Chu Heavenly Prison and went to the Alchemist Guild of Sumi Ling City to get the 1000 Ice Soul Leaf and the Fire Lotus Fruit. Chapter 449. Elder Yi sighed and smiled bitterly. I didn't get it. Looks like I have to look for it myself. Nye Tian frowned slightly and asked, Does the Alchemist Guild not have Ice Soul 1000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit? Ice Soul 1000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit were both 6th-grade herbs and were very rare. But with the Alchemist Guild's background, it wasn't hard to take them out. Could it be that Elder Yi and Meng Fanchen weren't close enough and the latter wasn't willing to give the herbs to Elder Yi? Elder Yi smiled faintly and said, My luck isn't good. Meng Fanchen, that old thing, is in closed-door training and isn't at the Alchemist Guild. I don't know anyone else and don't want to trouble them. I'll just look for the herbs myself. It turned out that Elder Ye's trip was in vain. The president of the Alchemist Guild, Meng Fanchen, was in closed-door training. Nye Tian nodded and suddenly thought of something. He looked at Elder Yi thoughtfully and said, The chaotic abyss has opened. Elder Yi, are you interested in going with us? Since it's an ancient ruin, there should be a lot of herbs there. Even if we don't have Ice Soul 1000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit, there should be something that can replace them. The most important part of the demon sealing curse was to use herbs with both fire and ice attribute. It wasn't necessary to use Ice Soul 1000 Leaves and Fire Lotus Fruit. Duanmu Lu and the rest's eyes lit up. They were obviously looking forward to it. Their team was too weak. Compared to the teams from the other aristocratic families and forces, they would be killed in seconds. Now that Nye Tian had a falling out with the 3 forces, if they met these people in the chaotic abyss, they would be killed in an instant. However, if they had Old Man Yi as their leader, their team would be quite powerful. All right. Elder Yi agreed readily. I also want to see how terrifying the legendary chaotic abyss is. Nye Tian nodded heavily, unable to hide his excitement. With Elder Ye's participation, Nye Tian was very confident about the trip to the chaotic abyss. After a while, the 4-winged griffin arrived at the edge of Chaos City and landed in a forest. Everyone came down. Go. Elder Yi erased the soul imprint he had placed on the 4-winged griffins and released them back into the forest. Roar, roar, roar. After erasing the soul mark of the warrior, the 3-headed lion vulture immediately recovered some of its berserk nature. It let out a strange roar and actually wanted to attack Elder Yi. Elder Ye's entire body released a horrifying saber intent. The 3-headed griffin sensed danger and cried out strangely again. Then, it soared into the sky and disappeared in the blink of an eye. You're letting him go just like that? Gooden was stunned by Elder Ye's actions. These were 3 fifth-rank spirit beasts. Even if they were to be sold, it would still be a huge fortune. Elder Yi smiled faintly and looked at the deep forest in front of him. He said profoundly, "They should not have come to the world of cultivators in the first place. If we let them go now, I wonder how many of them will survive." "That's right." Nye Tian nodded and sighed softly. Although the 4-winged griffins were 5th-rank spirit beasts, they had been used as mounts by warriors for too long, so they did not have the ruthlessness of spirit beasts. Their true battle strength was probably only a little stronger than a 4th-rank spirit beast. If they were released into the forest now, it would be good if 1 out of 3 of them could survive. This is the number 1 mountain range in the 3,000 small worlds, right? Nye Tian asked as he looked at the continuous mountain range in the distance. Yes. Elder Yi nodded and said, "The Hengduan Mountain is the number 1 mountain range in the 3,000 small worlds. It is rumored that there are 7th-rank spirit beasts and even 8th-rank spirit beasts in it. So, until now, no one dared to enter the depths of the Hengduan Mountain. Even if there were warriors who entered occasionally, they could only enter and never come out. So, the Hengduan Mountain is the most dangerous place in the 3,000 small worlds." The Hengduan Mountain. Nye Tian looked at the mountain range in the distance that went straight to the sky. His eyes were filled with endless yearning. "Alright, Mr. Nye, let's go to Chaos City first," Elder Yi said and turned to leave. After they left, they entered through another gate of Chaos City. In the next 10 days, Chaos City was very peaceful. Although there were a lot of forces entering the city, they didn't cause any big commotion. Everyone was waiting for Chaos City to announce the quota for entering the Chaotic Abyss. The commotion in the Chaotic Abyss this time was too big. Almost everyone knew about it. If everyone was allowed to enter the Chaotic Abyss, there would be too many people. So, Chaos City would definitely conduct a screening. 10 days later, a notice was posted in the center of Chaos City's martial arts field. All warriors who wanted to enter the Chaotic Abyss had to compete for the quota. This time, the number of teams allowed to enter the Chaotic Abyss was limited to 40, and each team could have a maximum of 10 people. The 4 great families, the Alchemist Guild, the Battle Cloud Sect, and other top forces directly obtained the quota. Among the 40 teams, only 28 were left for other warriors and forces to compete for. 2 days later, the quota for entering the Chaotic Abyss was held in the martial arts field. Tens of thousands of warriors gathered in the martial arts field. Their eyes were fixed on the top of the 28 stone pillars in the center of the martial arts field. On top of the pillars was a token, which was the Abyss token for entering the Chaotic Abyss. Every warrior could only snatch 1 Abyss token, and 1 Abyss token could bring up to 10 warriors into the Chaotic Abyss. Nye Tian, Elder Yi, and the others were among these tens of thousands of warriors. After 12 days, Nye Tian's complexion had already returned to normal. His strength had also increased by 1 level, reaching the 4th level of the Giant Spirit level. He also had 4 rank 3 star souls on the Star Soul Steel. His current state was very good. However, the matter of snatching the Abyss token would still be completed by Elder Yi. The warriors in the martial arts field had varying strength. Nye Tian estimated that there were thousands of warriors above the 5th level of True Essence Realm, and only a few dozen warriors around the 9th level of True Essence Realm. However, there were not many Spirit Wheel Realm warriors. After all, there were only about 100 Spirit Wheel Realm warriors in the entire 3,000 small world. Of course, this was only on the surface. As for how many Spirit Wheel Realm warriors there were in the Dark Forces, no one knew. At this time, those who dared to snatch the Abyss token had to be at least at the 7th level of True Essence Realm. If others tried to snatch it, they would only be cannon fodder. Buzz! At this time, a clear and intense bell suddenly rang in the martial arts field. This was the signal for the snatching of the Abyss token to begin. Snatch it! The Abyss token is mine. No one snatches it from me. I will kill whoever tries to snatch it. They are only at the 9th level of true essence realm. Can you kill them? In an instant, the entire martial arts field exploded. Countless roars resounded. Countless figures rose from the ground and flew towards the 28 stone pillars in the center of the martial arts field. Elder Yi, it's up to you. Nie Tian smiled faintly. He was very confident in Elder Yi. With Elder Ye's strength, he dared not say that he was the strongest among these tens of thousands of warriors, but he should at least be in the top 3. It was naturally not a problem for him to snatch one of the 28 abyss tokens. Good. Elder Yi roared. Voila, the death god iron chain behind him made a crisp sound. His entire body was like an abyss-breaking dragon. He flew out violently and shot towards a stone pillar. Chapter 450. Among the hundreds of cultivators, Elder Yi was like a tiger pouncing on a flock of sheep. Although there were high-level true energy realm masters around him, they were like weeds in front of him, completely unstoppable. What a powerful aura! Get out of the way! Someone exclaimed with a shocked expression. Wherever Elder Yi went, he was like a dragon breaking the surface of the water. The people around him quickly avoided him, not daring to get within 100 meters of him. In the blink of an eye, Elder Yi appeared on the stone pillar and easily obtained an abyss token. This kind of snatching method was originally a game for the strong. Whoever was stronger would be able to obtain the token. Got it! Seeing that Elder Yi had obtained the abyss token, Guden couldn't help but be excited. Duanmu Lu and Gu Wuyo also had pleasant surprise on their faces. Only Nie Tian's expression was calm. It was normal for Elder Yi to obtain the abyss token. It would be strange if he didn't. Don't snatch my token. It's mine. If you come any closer, I'll kill you. Kill your sister. Without strength, entering the chaotic abyss will only result in death. Give me the token as soon as possible, lest you lose your life. At this time, the cultivators in the air had already begun to fight for the abyss token, even putting their lives on the line. For a time, a variety of dazzling martial skills filled the sky, but with the fiercest murderous intent, they attacked in all directions. This was simply a big melee, and the people who attacked were all above the true energy realm 5th level. The impact was indescribable. Nie Tian was glad that he didn't follow Elder Yi to fish in troubled waters. Otherwise, even with Elder Ye's protection, it would be difficult to guarantee that he would come out unscathed. After obtaining the abyss token, Elder Yi directly rushed out of the air battlefield and arrived behind Nie Tian and the others, preparing to leave. With the abyss token in hand, the next step was to wait for the chaotic abyss to open tomorrow. However, at this time, Nie Tian's eyes were fixed on 2 familiar figures in the sky. One was the Spirit Array Master Yao Fik, and the other was the Great Chu Imperial Advisor Tawny. Although the Great Chu Empire was strong, it was still far from enough to directly obtain the Abyss token like the 4 great clans and other forces. That was why both Yao Fik and Tawny wanted to snatch the Abyss token. Both of them were in the True Element Stage 9. They were considered the strongest among the crowd. Yao Fei, on the other hand, had a rank 5 spiritual array protecting him, so he ignored everyone's attacks and flew towards a stone pillar, easily obtaining the Abyss token. Tawny, on the other hand, was fighting fiercely. She was holding a sword that was condensed from water droplets. It looked very strange. Courting death. At this time, Tawny already had an Abyss command in her hand, but when a martial artist rushed over to snatch it, she gave a tender shout and stabbed out with the water sword in her hand. A sharp sword light flashed, and that martial artist screamed pitifully as he died. Seeing this scene, Nie Tian couldn't help but frown. He didn't expect that the water sword in Tawny's hand would be so terrifying, easily killing a True Element Stage 7 martial artist. Moreover, this woman was really ruthless. When she attacked just now, her expression was as calm as water, and there was no hesitation in her eyes. One look and one could tell that she was someone who would kill without batting an eye. Mr. Nye, let's go. Elder Yi didn't want to waste time here, so he said. Nye Tian nodded his head, and the few of them immediately left. When they arrived at the inn, they all had relaxed expressions on their faces. Ha! This time, it's all thanks to Elder Yi. Otherwise, we really wouldn't have been able to enter the chaotic abyss. Gooden smiled mischievously, looking at Elder Yi with eyes full of worship. Elder Yi glanced at Nye Tian and said, I know. Even without me, Mr. Nye would definitely have a way to enter the chaotic abyss. Elder Yi is overpraising me. Nye Tian faintly smiled and didn't deny it. If not for Elder Yi, Nye Tian would also be able to enter the chaotic abyss, but he would have to ask for help. With his strength, if he wanted to snatch the abyss token, even if he could snatch it, he would probably have to pay a price. An abyss token allowed a team of 10 to enter the chaotic abyss. If Nye Tian didn't snatch the abyss token, he could look for people from the Tang family or people from the Battle Cloud sect to enter the chaotic abyss. Although Nye Tian wasn't familiar with the Battle Cloud sect, he knew that Zhan Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu were already good friends. Zhan Xiaoyi even gave Duanmu Lu a Battle Cloud sect token. Some people, even if they didn't know each other well, could become bosom friends even if they only met once. For example, Zhan Xiaoyi and Duanmu Lu. But some people, even if they knew each other for a lifetime, would still become enemies in the end. For example, Elder Yi and his good brother, who gave him the Death God chain. One day later, everyone once again gathered at the training field in the center of Chaos City. At this time, the 40 teams that entered the chaotic abyss had all appeared. Each team had at most 10 people, and with 40 teams added together, there were less than 400 people. Everyone was waiting anxiously, waiting for the people from Chaos City to appear. No one knew the specific opening location of the chaotic abyss, only the people from Chaos City knew. If they wanted to enter the chaotic abyss, they had to be led by Chaos City. After a moment, a figure appeared in the distant sky. In the blink of an eye, she appeared in front of everyone. Everyone looked at the figure standing in the sky, and couldn't help but stare blankly. This was a woman of unparalleled beauty. She had a beautiful appearance and a proud demeanor. Her entire body emitted a noble aura, but she had a calm smile on her face. Her spirited eyes seemed to be staring at every single person present. Nye Tian looked at the figure in the sky. Just looking at her made his heart tremble, and his mind went blank. He felt everything around him disappear, and he was actually in another space and time. In front of him was an abyss that couldn't be looked at. Just looking at it made people feel despair. Master! Just as Nye Tian was about to sink into the abyss, Corpse Demon Lord's voice rang in his mind, which made him wake up in an instant. Nye Tian woke up with a start, and beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. He was surprised. This woman is so strong, and she is at least a rank 5 illusionist. With just a look, she actually made Nye Tian fall into her illusion. It's really terrifying. Master, this woman is an illusionist. You must be careful. Corpse Demon Lord's voice sounded again, and it actually had a slight tremble. Nye Tian knew that Corpse Demon Lord himself was a powerful illusionist. The woman in front of him could actually make him feel nervous. Her attainments in illusions were really terrifying. Nye Tian glanced at the people around him. Except for a few Spirit Wheel Realm warriors, everyone else's eyes were dull and empty. Obviously, they had fallen into an illusion. This woman is so scary. She actually made so many people fall into an illusion at the same time. Nye Tian was surprised. He couldn't help but look at the woman with a touch of fear. Illusionists were rare, and those who could use illusions to such a level were even rarer. Chapter 451. The Deputy City Lord of Chaos City, Wan Qirong, gave a captivating smile. Her voice seemed to have a magical power, as if she wasn't talking in the air far away from you, but whispering in your ears. This feeling was very real, and it made people have an evil impulse. Nye Tian looked at Wan Qirong again, and he became more cautious. He didn't expect that the Deputy City Lord of Chaos City was actually a woman, and she was such a gorgeous woman, and her strength was so terrifying that it made people shudder. At this moment everyone woke up. Many people lowered their heads, and didn't dare to look at Wan Qirong directly. At a certain moment, Wan Qirong's gaze swept past Nie Tian again, and she seemed to be a little surprised. All the other experts below the spirit wheel state had fallen into her illusion, but why didn't this guy seem to be affected? She definitely wouldn't have guessed that there was an illusionist in Nie Tian's soul space. No matter what, Corpse Demon King was an illusionist who created the Land of Blood massacre. Even if his strength had deteriorated to a pitiful state, it was still very easy for him to see through her illusion. Nie Tian was also in deep thought. No wonder the City Lord of Chaos City never appeared. With such a powerful Deputy City Lord in charge, no forces dared to look down on Chaos City. It's her. This is impossible. At this moment, Elder Yi, who was standing beside Nie Tian, had a strange expression on his face. His eyes were filled with doubt, confusion, and even anger. Elder Yi, do you know her? Nie Tian asked Elder Yi through telepathy. From Wan Qirong's reaction, she didn't seem to know Elder Yi. And the latter's reaction to her was a little too big. An old friend, maybe I saw wrongly. Elder Yi replied with telepathy, and then there was no more reply. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome from afar. Wan Qirong spoke again. Her voice was soft and gentle, like a gentle breeze caressing one's cheeks, causing one to feel intoxicated to the point of falling asleep. She continued, the opening of the abyss of chaos this time is the largest in history. Everyone knows that the chaotic abyss is an ancient ruin. No one knows what is inside, but everyone wants to know. However, it's impossible for everyone to enter the chaotic abyss, so we can only use the abyss order to limit the number of people who can enter. Those who can't enter can only regret it. Just wait patiently for the next opening of the abyss. Wan Qirong had a faint smile on the corner of her mouth. Even if it was a refusal, it would still make people feel fascinated. She was a very charming woman. Every frown, every smile, and every movement of hers was extremely alluring. Among all the women Nie Tian had met, only Aokiki Lily could compare to her. Those who didn't have the qualifications to enter the chaotic abyss were still feeling indignant, but now they were beaming with joy. Wan Qirong's charm was evident. Following that, Wan Qirong didn't waste any more words. She led the 40 teams and left the arena. Moments later, Nie Tian and the others came to a deep tunnel. At this time, there weren't many people around, only about 300. Nie Tian saw many familiar faces. Tang 13, Zhan Xiaoi, Aokiki Lily, Ding Yifan, and a few others were all in the crowd. Nie Tian wasn't in a hurry to greet them. Once they entered the abyss, there would be plenty of time to catch up. Ladies and gentlemen, please follow me. Wan Qirong walked at the front of the group. Observing this woman at such a close distance, her charm was even stronger. However, Nie Tian's attention wasn't on Wan Qirong at this time. Instead, he was constantly sizing up the 40 teams. When the chaotic abyss opened, the major forces of the 3,000 small worlds had sent out their experts. Apart from the experts who led the teams, the rest were all young geniuses. When these people met each other, no one was willing to submit to the other. It was bound to be a magnificent collision. Among the 40 teams, apart from the 4 big families, the Alchemist Guild, the Martial Gathering Merchant Union, the Battle Cloud Sect, and some other super forces led by Spirit Wheel Realm warriors, the other forces were led by True Element Level 9 warriors. This made Nie Tian feel slightly relieved. If there were any treasures in the chaotic abyss, Elder Yi would definitely be able to snatch them easily. So far, Nie Tian hadn't found anyone stronger than Elder Yi. After passing through the deep tunnel, the crowd was in front of a slightly wider open space. On the other side of the open space was a 10,000 feet cliff. Nie Tian immediately came to a realization. The tunnel they came from should be a cave, and this cave was connected to the cliff on the other side. Everyone, please look, that is the entrance to the chaotic abyss. Wan Qirong walked to the edge of the cliff and pointed at something that looked like a thick cloud in the air. Everyone followed and looked at the sky. In the sky there was a dark crack, like the squinting eyes of a huge beast, or like a 10,000 feet high valley. Not far away from the pitch-black crack, 4 stunning figures stood in mid-air, guarding the crack. Among the 4 figures, there was one that was very familiar. When Ye Tian saw her face clearly, his face couldn't help but stiffen for a moment. He shouted out her name, Rui Qianyu. That's right, Rui Qianyu was actually among the 4 figures, and she was wearing the same clothes as the others. She joined Chaos City? Ye Tian immediately understood, and his brow furrowed. In order to take revenge, Rui Qianyu actually joined Chaos City. Teacher. At this moment, the 4 figures floated over and bowed to Wan Qirong. Teacher. Ye Tian's face darkened again when he heard this form of address. Not only did Rui Qianyu join Chaos City, but she also became the Deputy City Lord Wan Qirong's disciple. Of course, Rui Qianyu discovered Ye Tian's existence. Her cold eyes only glanced at him, and there was no ripple at all. Ye Tian felt a sharp pain in his heart. He had seen too many people who were blinded by hatred. Rui Qianyu did not hesitate to join an organization like Chaos City for revenge, but was it really useful? Would Chaos City offend the Land of Bloody Massacre or the Heaven Burial Society for one person? Ye Tian took a deep breath and forcibly suppressed the emotions in his heart. How's the Chaos Abyss? Wan Qirong asked with a faint smile. Teacher, the abyss has been opened to the maximum. The crack will start to close in another half a month, and it will completely close within a month. One of the female disciples replied respectfully. Wan Qirong nodded and turned to the people behind her. Everyone, you have all heard it. The Chaos Abyss can only last for a month. After entering, no matter what happens, you must come out within a month. What will happen if you can't come out? Someone asked. Wan Qirong's lips curled up slightly, and she said with a smile, If you can't come out, you will be trapped in the abyss forever. Hearing Wan Qirong's answer, everyone was terrified. Being trapped in the Chaos Abyss was a dead end. Chapter 452. Wan Qirong didn't waste any more time and said, Everyone, please. Although everyone wanted to enter the chaotic abyss, when the time came, no one dared to be the first to step out. The chaotic abyss was a great temptation, but it was also a great danger. Who knew what was inside? Ye Tian glanced at Rui Qianyu. The latter also looked at him without any expression and didn't say anything. Ye Tian nodded and said to Elder Yi behind him, Elder Yi, let's go. Okay. Elder Yi was also a madman of his generation. At this moment, he didn't have the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he was unusually excited. Elder Yi released his saber intent, forming a saber intent shield that wrapped around Ye Tian and the others. Immediately after, they soared into the sky. The 5 of them directly flew towards the abyssal chasm. Someone is going, the crowd exclaimed. When Wu Mang, Mo Feng, Qiu Wuhan, and the others saw that it was Elder Yi and Ye Tian, their faces revealed a sinister expression. They couldn't wait for something to happen to them. Ye Tian. When Tang 13 saw Ye Tian's figure, the corner of her mouth rose into a smile. She knew that when the chaotic abyss opened, Ye Tian would definitely come to join in the fun. Aoki Lily, Ding Yifan, and the others also saw Ye Tian's figure and were all surprised. Under everyone's gaze, Ye Tian's group got closer and closer to the abyssal chasm. When they were about 10 meters away from the chasm, suddenly, a dazzling white light shot out and wrapped around them. Immediately after, a huge force appeared. Ye Tian felt as if he had fallen into a space-time vortex. The feeling of powerlessness made him unable to resist. The dazzling white light disappeared. When Ye Tian opened his eyes again, what appeared in front of him wasn't a vast expanse of time. Instead, it was a huge cliff whose edge couldn't be seen. At this moment, they seemed to be in a strange space-time. There was only this cliff in front of them and nothing else. Teacher, this. Duanmu Lu didn't understand what was going on in front of him. Nie Tian took out the true extreme crystal and probed it with his divine sense. Nothing in the surroundings had changed, which meant that this wasn't an illusion. Elder Yi, let's go up the cliff. Nie Tian looked at the cliff in front of him. There was no other way. Elder Yi answered and led a few people up the cliff. After a while, Nie Tian felt a strong wind blowing past him, but the cliff in front of him did not change at all. Everything was too strange. Nie Tian felt as if the cliff was alive. As they rose, the cliff rose with them. But reason told him that it was impossible. There were no living cliffs, and no one could make cliffs move up and down in a straight line. Nie Tian, can you guys hold on? Elder Yi increased the protection of the saber intent shield and continued to rise. They had already entered the chaotic abyss. How could they give up just because of a cliff? Elder Yi increased his speed of ascension. The strong wind in the sky was like a steel knife hitting his face. After an unknown period of time, Nie Tian faintly felt that the direction of the cliff seemed to be slowly changing. It was originally vertical, but now it was horizontal. At this moment, Nie Tian and the others had risen at least tens of thousands of meters. This cliff was really ridiculously high. Under the pressure of the strong wind, Duanmu Lu and Gu Wuyo were drowsy and couldn't hold on any longer. Hold on, I have a feeling that we are almost there. Nie Tian was slightly excited and shouted loudly. Elder Yi didn't say anything and continued to rise along the cliff. Gradually, the cliff completely changed from vertical to horizontal and began to extend in all directions. What is that? At this moment, Nie Tian saw a dazzling light suddenly appear a few hundred meters in front of him. It was like a sea of light, almost blinding them. The light flowed, dazzling and unusually dazzling. From afar, it gave people a mysterious and illusory feeling. And at this moment, the fierce astral winds around him had disappeared without him noticing. Elder Yi didn't remove the sword intent shield. He was afraid that unexpected danger would appear. The few of them were excited and walked forward. This is... Quickly walking to the place where the sea of light was, Nie Tian was completely stunned by the scene in front of him. His expression was a little sluggish. Elder Yi and the others had the same reaction as Nie Tian. They looked at the scene in front of them, dumbfounded. The scene in front of them was like a dream, giving people a feeling that it was illusory. The light connected to form an illusory sea. Being in it, they felt like they had forgotten themselves. They were in a completely relaxed state, giving people an indescribable feeling of comfort and joy. This wasn't an illusion, but a real world. Nie Tian faintly felt that the scene in front of him might be the original scene when the world was created. There was nothing but endless light. In such a wonderful environment, one would feel endless joy. It was as if all troubles could be thrown away. Compared with the world behind him, the world in front of him was a completely different world. There was no pressure, no restrictions. His whole body and soul were free. How is this possible? After an unknown period of time, Nie Tian finally calmed down. The first thing he said was still the same doubt. Elder Yi and the others were still in a state of obsession, because such a world was even more illusory than a dream. Nie Tian didn't care about them. He walked forward and wanted to reach out to touch the sea of light. However, he was blocked by a strange force. It's a restriction. Nie Tian immediately realized that there was a restriction protecting this sea of light. He sensed the strength of the restriction. It wasn't very strong. With his strength, although he couldn't completely break it, he could easily make a crack. At this time, the others also arrived. Looking at the scene in front of them, they all exclaimed, "Wow! What is this place? Damn! I'm not dreaming, am I? So beautiful! How can there be such a beautiful place in the world?" Nie Tian looked back at the people behind him. Half of them were gone. It seemed that just that cliff alone made many people give up on the chaotic abyss. As more and more people arrived, the sea of light in front of them gradually disappeared. Nie Tian frowned slightly, as if he thought of something. The corners of his mouth curled up, but there was some regret on his face. Nie Tian guessed that the world in front of him should be some kind of projection at the beginning of the world's creation, or a projection of another world. Like a mirage, it was preserved by some mysterious force. When the crowd arrived, the noise and the invisible aura emitted by the cultivators dispersed the sea of light mirage. Such a beautiful scene could only be seen once in a lifetime, and one would have no regret. Seeing the sea of light mirage disappear, the crowd felt regret. Nie Tian no longer hesitated. He directly opened a crack on the restriction, just enough for one person to enter. He didn't stand on ceremony and was the first to enter. The next step was to enter the chaotic abyss.